Hello, my friend. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, welcome. Welcome to this quiet corner of the night where the stories are slow and the world outside can wait. And the only thing asked of you is simply to rest. My name is Alan, and tonight I'm going to take you somewhere very old and very warm. I want you to take a breath first. Just one slow, easy breath in and let it go. Feel the weight of your body settle into whatever is holding you right now. Your bed, your pillow, your blanket pulled close. Feel the edges of yourself soften just a little. Feel the day begin to loosen its grip. You don't need to hold on to anything tonight. Not the to-do lists. Not the unfinished thoughts. Not the hum and buzz of the modern world, with all its noise and urgency and bright, demanding light. None of that is required of you right now. Right now, the only thing you need to do is listen and maybe drift. And if sleep finds you before the story ends good, that is exactly as it should be. That is the whole point of being here. You are safe and you are warm and there is nowhere else you need to be. So let me tell you where we're going tonight. Tonight, we are travelling back. A long way back. We are going to a small stone cottage somewhere in the English countryside. Somewhere in the middle of the 18th century, in the decades that historians call the Georgian era, the reign of the Georges, a time of candlelight and clay pipes and church bells ringing out across frost-covered fields, a time before electric light, before central heating, before the world accelerated into everything it would eventually become. A simpler time, in many ways, a harder time, in many ways, but tonight, we are not here for the hard parts. Tonight, we are here for the warmth. We are here because on a winter evening, on an evening very much like many evenings you yourself have known, a family came in from the cold. A husband, broad-shouldered and clay-booted, who had been working since before the light. A wife, steady and capable, whose hands moved through the world with a particular unhurried grace. 3 children, small and warm-breathed and loud in the way that children are loud before they finally fall asleep. They came in from the cold, they shut the door against the night, and they made something. In that low-ceilinged, smoke-warmed, tallow-lit room, something that I find, when I sit quietly with it, to be one of the most beautiful things that human beings have ever made. They made an evening at home, just that, just an evening. A meal eaten and cleared away. Socks darned by firelight, a pipe smoked near the hearth, children coaxed one by one up a narrow wooden ladder to the loft, prayers murmured low, like a song that doesn't need to be loud to carry meaning. And then, slowly, the fire banked, the candle snuffed, and the whole household settling into the deep, dark, winter-sweet quiet of sleep. That is all. And somehow it is everything. I find this so quietly extraordinary. The more time I spend with these small, unrecorded evenings, the evenings that never made it into any history book, the evenings that no one thought to write down because they seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable, the more I am convinced that they are the real history, the history that matters most. Not the battles, not the proclamations, not the kings and their crowded courts, but this, a fire. A family, a winter night, held at bay by 4 stone walls and a little human warmth. So tonight, I invite you to step inside with me, to duck your head beneath that low doorway, to feel the change in the air the moment you cross the threshold from the sharp, needle cold of an English winter evening to the soft, enveloping, amber golden warmth of a room where the fire has been burning all day. To smell the wood smoke and the tallow and the faint yeasty ghost of bread baked this morning, to hear the small sounds, the creak of a chair, the murmur of a child not yet quite asleep, the soft settling of old timbers contracting gently in the cold, to feel, in your bones, that particular feeling, the feeling of being inside, of being sheltered, of the wind being something that belongs to the world out there, while you belong to the warmth in here. You are warm, my friend. You are safe. You are exactly where you need to be. Let's go in. Let us take a moment, before we go any further, to simply look around, to let our eyes adjust. Because stepping into a Georgian farmworker's cottage in the middle of the 18th century is a little like stepping into a different kind of light, a different quality of seeing. The world in here is not bright. It is not sharp-edged or evenly lit the way our modern rooms are. It is warm and it is golden and it moves. The firelight moves. The shadows move. Even the walls seem to breathe, in a slow and gentle way. The year is somewhere around 1752. Give or take a handful of years, it doesn't much matter. The rhythms of this life do not change quickly. They haven't changed in generations, and they won't change for another generation yet. The world outside these walls is the world of King George II, a world of wool markets and muddy lanes, of parish churches and common fields, of seasons that mean everything because they determine whether the harvest comes in, and whether the winter is survivable, and whether there is bread. But we are inside now, and inside, the world is small and manageable and known. The cottage is a single room, more or less. Low ceilings so low that a tall man must angle his head near the central beam. Walls of stone and lime plaster, whitewashed once, now the colour of old cream. The floor is packed earth, swept clean, with a braided rag rug laid before the hearth made from strips of worn-out clothing. Nothing wasted, everything repurposed. The hearth itself takes up nearly one entire wall. It is the reason for the room, in many ways. A wide stone opening, blackened from years of fires, with an iron crane arm that swings the cooking pot over the flames. Above it, the chimney draws the smoke upward mostly. A string of dried herbs hangs from a hook nearby. Rosemary, perhaps, a little dried thyme. Their faint scent mingles with the wood smoke into something that is almost medicinal, almost sweet. A rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, one with arms, one without, a stool for the children, a spinning wheel in the corner, quiet now, its work done for the day. Shelves holding a few earthenware bowls, a salt box, a small tin canister, a Bible, thick and worn at its corners, sitting on the shelf nearest the fire as if it too is warming itself. And the family, they are here though the children are nearly ready for bed, and the room holds that particular hush that comes over a house when small people are growing heavy-eyed. The husband sits near the fire, his clay-heavy boots removed and set by the door. The wife moves between the hearth and the table with the easy automatic grace of someone who has navigated this small space 10,000 times and knows its every corner by heart. This is their world, small and warm and full. Take a breath. Settle in. We are going to spend the whole evening here together, you and I. There is nowhere to rush, nowhere to be. Just this room, just this fire, just this soft and ordinary and quietly magnificent evening, stretching out ahead of us like a slow, deep breath. Let it begin. The supper things have just been cleared. That is where we find ourselves, now. That particular moment you may know it yourself just after a meal has ended. When the plates have been moved aside, and the table holds only crumbs and the ghost of warmth, and the room has shifted from the busy business of eating into something slower, something quieter, something that feels almost like a collective exhale. The family has eaten well enough this evening, not abundantly. Abundance is not a word that belongs easily to a farmworker's table in 1752, but well enough. There was a thick pottage of barley and leeks and a few small pieces of salt pork, cooked slowly in the iron pot since midday. There was bread, a dense dark loaf made from a mix of wheat and rye and a little oat flour, baked earlier in the week, slightly stale now, but perfectly good when torn into pieces and dipped into the broth. There was small ale to drink weak, barely fermented, more like a very thin malt water than anything intoxicating, but safer than the well water in the colder months, and filling, and warm enough having sat near the fire. It was a good supper, simple and honest and enough. I find something deeply settling in that word. Enough. In this era, in this household, enough was not a consolation. It was not settling for less. Enough was a quiet triumph. Enough meant the season had been managed well. Enough meant the salt pork had lasted into November. Enough meant the children ate until they stopped reaching for more, and then sat back with the particular rosy heaviness of small people who are full and warm and close to sleep. The eldest, the boy, 7 years old, gap-toothed, with a smear of broth still on his chin that no one has bothered to wipe, is sitting on the stool near the fire, leaning his head against the rough plaster wall. His eyes are open, but only just. He is in that beautiful in-between country that children visit at the end of long days, not quite awake, not quite asleep, present, and yet already beginning to drift. The two girls, 5 and 3, close enough in age to be constant companions and constant tormentors of each other, are on the rag rug before the hearth. The older one is attempting to show the younger one how to do something with a piece of string, a cat's cradle perhaps. Her small fingers loop and pull with great seriousness. The younger one keeps getting tangled, and then laughing, a sound like a small bell, brief and bright. The husband, let us call him simply the man of the house, for that is how this world would have known him, sits in the armchair, the better of the two. His chair. He has earned it many times over. He has been in the field since 6:30 this morning, working the autumn ploughing on the far side of the common, turning the heavy clay soil with a team of oxen borrowed from the farm's main tenant. His hands, resting now on the arms of the chair, are extraordinary things, wide across the knuckles, darkened and roughened by years of outdoor work. The left thumb carries an old scar, a white crescent, thin as a new moon from some long-ago encounter with a reaping hook that he has mentioned only once or twice and never with any drama. Those hands are still now. That is what I keep coming back to in this moment. The stillness of those hands, because all day long they have been moving, guiding, gripping, pulling, lifting, and now, at last, in the hour after supper, they are allowed to simply rest. Palms turned upward, fingers loose, the tension gone out of them like water draining from a cloth. He is not asleep. Not yet. His eyes are on the fire, half-lidded, with an expression that I find quietly magnificent, the expression of a man who is thinking of nothing in particular, and finding that to be exactly enough. You are safe here, my friend, warm and completely at rest. Nothing needs your attention right now. Just let the room hold you, gently, the way this fire holds this family without effort, without asking anything in return. The woman of the house, the wife, the mother, the warm and capable centre of this small world is at the table. She is clearing the last of the supper things with a series of practised, unhurried movements, stacking the wooden bowls. The bowls are not matched, they were made at different times, acquired from different places, 2 bought at the market, and 1 carved by a neighbour's husband, who had a skill with wood. They nest together unevenly, the way mismatched things often do, fitting well enough despite their differences. She carries the bowls to the small basin of water near the window. She wipes each one with a cloth. The cloth is damp and slightly grey, well used, wrung out with the brisk confidence of someone who does this every evening, and has never once thought of it as a task worthy of particular attention. And yet, what strikes me the most, watching her move through this small and repetitive ritual, is the quality of her attention. She is not distracted. She is not somewhere else in her mind, while her hands go through the motions. She is here entirely, quietly, here, wiping a wooden bowl clean, setting it on the shelf, moving to the next one. There is something in this that I keep turning over. We live, many of us, in an age that has given us more than enough ways to escape the present moment, to be somewhere else while our hands are doing one thing and our minds are doing 10 other things. And there is nothing wrong with that. The mind needs its wandering, its dreaming, its leaping from one thing to another. But there is also something in this woman's quality of presence, this unhurried, unself-conscious inhabiting of each small action that I find deeply, quietly enviable. She is washing bowls, and she is entirely, peacefully here. The fire crackles. A log shifts that soft, settling thud, followed by a brief brightening of the flames. The light in the room pulses once, warmly, and then settles again into its steady amber glow. The younger girl, the 3-year-old, has given up on the string game. She has crawled to her father's feet and is leaning against his bootless ankles with the boneless ease of a small child who is approximately 4 minutes from sleep. Her thumb is near her mouth, Her eyes are at half-mast. The father looks down at her. His face does something quiet and complicated. There is no word for it, really. It is not quite a smile. It is softer than a smile, less deliberate. It is more like the face a person makes when something happens that is so good, so simple, so uncomplicated in its goodness, that the face just opens without being asked. He looks down at his small daughter leaning against his feet, and his already still hands become somehow even stiller. This all happened so very long ago. These people, this room, this evening, all of it softened now into the deep, kind distance of centuries. There is nothing here that can reach you, just the warmth of it, just the firelight, just these quiet, ordinary human beings doing what human beings have always done, feeding each other, sitting together, letting the day go. Breathe easy. Let the weight of your body sink a little further into wherever you are resting. The hour after supper, in this cottage, in this era, had a rhythm all its own. Historians who study everyday Georgian life, and there are some wonderful, careful, patient scholars who have done exactly this, piecing together the texture of ordinary days from account books and diaries and parish records and the occasional extraordinary memoir, tell us that the evening meal was typically the day's main anchor. Not the largest meal necessarily that was often a midday dinner, eaten in the fields or at a workman's table, but the evening meal was the gathering, the moment when the scattered threads of a day came together in one room, one light, one shared table. After it, the household did not simply collapse into sleep. There was work still to be done, quiet work, firelit work, the kind of work that could be done with tired hands and a mind beginning to soften at its edges, mending, spinning, a little carving perhaps, the checking of tools for tomorrow, the feeding of any animals in the small lean-to attached to the back of the cottage, a pig, perhaps, or a few chickens, or a goat. But first, just this sitting, just this resting, just this being together in the warmth, while the fire does its work and the darkness presses gently against the shuttered window and the children fill the room with their specific, irreplaceable gravity. The boy by the wall has slipped, at last, into the first shallow waters of sleep. His head has dropped slightly. His mouth is open, just barely. He breathes slowly, steadily, the way children breathe when they are truly, deeply relaxed, not the held breath of concentration, not the quick breath of excitement, but the long, open, effortless breath of a body that has used itself well today and is now, gratefully, letting go. The wife has finished with the bowls. She dries her hands on her apron, a gesture so habitual, so deeply grooved into her body's memory that she barely notices she is doing it. She turns and looks at the room, at her husband in his chair, at her daughter at his feet, at her son half asleep against the wall, at the small girl still looping string through her fingers, though her movements are slower now, dreamier, the cat's cradle becoming something less like a game and more like a lullaby in motion. Something moves across the wife's face, something like what moved across her husband's face a few minutes ago when he looked down at the small weight of their daughter against his feet, that nameless, wordless thing, that quiet, private recognition of, this is good, this, right here, this is the thing itself. She goes to her mending basket. She settles herself into the chairless chair, the lesser of the two, the one without arms, the one that belongs to her by default, because she is always the last to sit and the first to rise. She pulls the basket onto her lap. She reaches inside, and this is where the real evening begins. The mending basket has been sitting in the same corner of this cottage for as long as anyone in this household can remember. It is not a beautiful object, particularly. It is a wide, shallow basket, woven from strips of willow, the kind made and sold at any country market, sturdy and plain, and entirely without pretension. The rim has been repaired once, on the left side, where the weaving had begun to loosen, bound back together with a length of thin twine that has since darkened to the colour of the basket itself. The inside is lined with a piece of faded linen blue once, perhaps, or green. It is difficult now to say. With any certainty that has been washed so many times, It has arrived at a colour that belongs to no particular category. A soft, undecided, comfortable colour. The colour of something thoroughly used and thoroughly loved. Inside this basket lives a whole small world. There are socks, 3 pairs in need of attention, draped over each other in the relaxed way that soft things arrange themselves when no one is organising them. There is a shirt of her husband's with a torn seam along the left shoulder, folded with the tear facing out so she will not forget it. There is a small girl's pinafore missing 2 of its ties. There is a length of woolen yarn wound around 2 fingers into a rough skein rust-coloured, slightly uneven, hand-spun on the spinning wheel that stands quiet in the corner. There are needles of 3 different sizes stuck into a small pad of felted wool. There are 2 buttons, mismatched, waiting for a garment that needs them. There is a thimble pewter, dented on one side, polished smooth on the top from years of use. She reaches into the basket now, without looking. Her hand knows this territory. She draws out the topmost pair of socks her husband's, the ones she has been meaning to get to for the better part of a week. She holds them up, briefly, toward the firelight, turning them in her hands to find the worn place. It is at the heel of the right one, a thin spot, the wool rubbed nearly to transparency, a small hole just beginning to form at the centre where the fabric has finally given way. She runs her thumb over it. The worn wool is soft, almost silky, in a way that only very old and very used fabric achieves every rough fibre long since sanded away by friction and washing, leaving something unexpectedly tender. She sets the left sock on her knee and focuses on the right. Threading a needle by firelight is a skill unto itself. I want to stay with this for a moment, because I think it is one of those small things that deserves more attention than it usually receives. In an era before electric light, before the flat, even, reliable brightness that we carry in our pockets and flip on without thinking every close and careful task was a negotiation with available light. You positioned yourself near the fire. You angled the work toward the brightest point of the flame. You squinted, slightly, and you learned to thread a needle not by seeing the eye of the needle with perfect clarity, but by feel and experience and a kind of educated intuition that comes from doing a thing so many times it becomes something your hands know rather than something your eyes need to see. She licks the end of the thread, a practical habit, stiffening the fibre to a point. She holds the needle between thumb and forefinger, brings it close to the light. The thread misses on the first try. On the second it slides through. She pulls a length of thread through and knots the end. A small, practiced knot, made with 2 fingers and a quick rolling motion that takes perhaps 1 second, and was learned so long ago she could not tell you how or when. It is simply something her hands know how to do. You are warm, my friend. Completely, deeply comfortable. Let the sound of this settle over you, the quiet of a room where the biggest sound is the fire, and the softest sound is a needle pulling thread through worn wool. There is nothing here but warmth and gentleness. Let your thoughts go wherever they wish, soft and slow. Now she begins. The act of darning true darning, the kind practiced in an era when nothing was thrown away if it could possibly be repaired, is a more intricate and meditative thing than it might first appear. It is not simply sewing up a hole. A hole in a knitted sock cannot simply be stitched shut the way a torn seam can be rejoined. The knitted fabric has a structure, a web of interlocking loops, and to repair it properly, you must reconstruct that structure. You must weave new thread across the gap in one direction, and then weave back through those threads in the other direction, building a small new piece of fabric within the old one, thread by thread, row by row. It is slow. It requires patience and steadiness and the willingness to give full attention to something very small. Georgian women, and it was most often women, in this domestic context, though men who worked alone certainly mended their own things, grew up learning this skill, the way children today grow up learning to use a keyboard. It was simply part of the texture of life. Young girls learn to darn alongside their mothers and grandmothers, sitting near the fire in exactly this way, the needle moving through the wool in exactly this rhythm, in cottages across England and Scotland and Wales, winter after winter, year after year, generation after generation. There is something moving to me about this continuity, this exact action A woman, a fire, a worn sock, a needle repeated, night after night, across centuries of English winters. The specific women change, the specific socks change. The fire is rebuilt each morning from ash and tinder and the memory of yesterday's warmth, but the action itself persists. The needle moves in the same patient arc. The thread catches the light in the same way. The fingers find their rhythm in the same slow, meditative pulse. What stays with me is how this kind of repetitive, careful handwork was understood in this era, not as drudgery, but as a form of, I want to choose this word carefully, stewardship. The wife who darned her husband's socks was not simply repairing fabric. She was extending the life of something that had been made with effort and cost real money at the market, or real time at the spinning wheel and knitting needles. She was saying, in the language of action rather than words, this matters. This is worth tending. We do not discard what can be restored. What a philosophy. What a quietly radical way of moving through a world. The fire shifts again. Another small settling of logs, a brief cascade of sparks that rise and vanish before they reach the chimney's throat. The light in the room pulses and then steadies. On the rag rug, the younger girl has given up the string game entirely. She is lying on her side now, her cheek pressed against the braided rug, her eyes closed. She has gone to sleep so gradually, so seamlessly, that no one could point to the exact moment it happened. One moment she was looping string. Now she is somewhere else entirely, her small chest rising and falling in the long, slow rhythm of genuine sleep. Her mother glances at her. The needle pauses for just a moment. A look crosses her face, that same unnameable thing again, that private warmth, and then she returns to her work. She will carry the girl up to the loft in a little while, but not yet. Let her sleep here for a moment, near the fire, in the warmth. There is no hurry. This all happened so very long ago. These hands, this needle, this worn and loved sock, all of it resting now in the soft distance of centuries. Nothing from that world can reach you. You are entirely safe. You are held in the present moment, warm and still, while this old and gentle story moves around you like slow water. The thread catches, pulls, catches again, back and forth, back and forth. The warp threads laid first a series of parallel lines bridging the whole from one side to the other, each one anchored in the solid fabric beyond the worn place, evenly spaced, taut but not tight. And then the weft, the wife's needle moving across and through and across again, weaving under and over the warp threads in the alternating pattern that will, slowly, fill the gap with new fabric. Under, over, over. The motion is hypnotic, even to perform. Especially to perform, perhaps. There is a quality to repetitive handwork, to any repetitive, rhythmic, close-focused physical task that quiets the thinking mind in a way that is not so different from meditation or prayer, or the deliberate following of the breath. The attention narrows, the body steadies, the internal chatter softens, and in its place comes something calmer, clearer, more spacious. The wife is not thinking about tomorrow's bread, or next week's market, or whether the pig has enough fodder for the winter. She is thinking about the thread, about the needle, about the small, careful geometry of under and over, in the firelight, in the warmth, in this room that holds everything she loves within 4 stone walls. And in this quiet I want to stay just a moment longer, because the tallow candle on the shelf is beginning to claim more of the room's attention now. The fire still warm and generous, but the candle, the sharper, more intimate light, it is casting its small circle of yellow-white brightness just above and to the right of where she sits, throwing her shadow large and soft against the whitewashed wall. There she is, in silhouette, a woman in a chair, a basket on her lap, a needle in her hand, moving with the slow, certain rhythm of long practice. And there is the fire, breathing beside her, and there is the sleeping child on the rug, and there is the husband, eyes closed now, his extraordinary hands perfectly still, and outside, just beginning, just gathering itself against the thatch and the stone, the night is deepening, the cold is settling in earnest. The frost is beginning its quiet, patient work on the grass, on the gate latch, on the bare branches of the hedgerow. But in here, the needle moves, under, over, and the cottage holds its warmth like cupped hands hold water carefully and with great tenderness and for as long as it possibly can. The fire has been burning in this hearth since early this morning. It was lit before dawn, before the rest of the household stirred, before the children's voices came tumbling down from the loft, before the first pale grey light began to feel its way through the gap in the shutter. The wife was the first one up, as she is every morning, easing herself out from the warmth of the bed with the quiet, practised care of someone who does not wish to disturb the sleeping. She crossed the cold floor in bare feet cold enough, this November morning, that the packed earth had a particular bite to it, a sharpness that went straight through the soles and up into the ankles. She knelt at the hearth. She raked aside the banked ash from the night before, searching for the ember she knew would be there faint orange red, stubbornly alive beneath its grey blanket, and she coaxed it back into being, with a breath and a little dry tinder, and the steady, patient attention of someone who has performed this small resurrection every morning for more years than she could easily count. That ember became a flame. That flame became a fire. And this fire, this particular fire, in this particular hearth, on this particular November evening in the 1750s, has been the quiet engine of this household's entire day. Cooking, heating, drying, lighting. It has boiled water for the morning's small ale. It has simmered the pottage through the long hours of the afternoon. It has dried the children's damp stockings hung on the iron bracket near the chimney's edge. It has warmed the room through every hour, even the coldest ones. When the wind came in under the door, and the frost climbed the outside of the shutter and the stone walls seemed to breathe cold into the room despite everything, the fire has done all of this without being asked, without pausing, without complaint, without requiring anything more than to be fed and tended and given air. I find this quietly remarkable. The relationship between a Georgian family and their hearth fire was something that I think we can barely imagine now. From our side of the great transformation that electricity and central heating brought to ordinary life. We heat our homes without thought. We flip a switch, we turn a dial, we tap a screen, and warmth arrives invisible, immediate, disconnected from any visible source. There is no relationship in it, no tending, no watching, no learning of a particular fire's particular character. But the fire in this hearth is a known thing. This woman knows this fire the way she knows her children's faces. She knows how it behaves in wet weather, when the chimney draws poorly and the smoke thickens and the flames stay low and reluctant. She knows how it behaves on a dry, cold night like tonight, when the drawer is clean and strong and the wood catches quickly and the heat spreads into the room with generous ease. She knows which wood burns long and which burns bright and brief. She knows the sound, the specific, slightly different sound of a green log added to a well-established fire versus a dry one. She knows when to add wood and when to leave it, when to stir and when to let it settle, when it needs more air and when it is doing perfectly well on its own. This knowledge is not written down anywhere. It lives in her hands, in her ears. In the particular way her eyes read a bed of coals the way a sailor reads a sky. You are safe, my friend, warm and deeply at rest. Let the fire be your companion right now, not this fire, 300 years gone, but the warmth you carry inside yourself, that small, steady heat that is always there when you are quiet enough to feel it. Let it spread, slowly, into your shoulders, your chest, your hands. Let it soften everything it touches. The wood burning in this hearth tonight is most likely oak-dense, reliable, long-burning oak from the managed woodland at the edge of the estate. In Georgian England, the question of fuel was not a small one for a farmworker's family. Wood had to be gathered, purchased, or obtained through ancient rights of access, the right to gather fallen branches, the right to cut a certain amount of underwood from the common rights that were slowly being eroded in this era, enclosed away along with the common fields, though this family does not know yet how thoroughly that world will change. Tonight, they have wood. The pile stacked against the outside wall of the cottage was built up through autumn, and it will last, if carefully managed, through to March. The oak logs in the hearth are at the middle of their burning now past the initial bright, almost impatient blaze of fresh-caught wood, settled into the deep, even, patient burn of good hardwood fully engaged. The flames are lower than they were at supper time. They are more orange than yellow now, more amber than gold, moving in that slow, contemplative way that fire moves when it is not hurrying anywhere. The logs themselves have visibly changed their bark long gone, their outer surface transformed into a thick crust of char, glowing a deep, pulsing red in the places where the air reaches them most directly. Below the logs, the bed of coals. This is where the real warmth lives. Not in the flames are the visible surface, the performance, the part that catches the eye. The real heat radiates from the coals, from those dense, compressed, quietly incandescent masses of transformed wood that glow without flickering, that hold their heat with a steadiness that the dancing flames above them do not quite have. The coals are ember orange, deepening to red deepening. At the very heart, to something almost white, a colour that seems to come from inside the material itself, as if a small sun has been compressed into each one. The heat coming off this hearth is substantial and real, and entirely physical. You can feel it from 3 feet away, a gentle pressure of warmth against the face and hands, a slight tightening of the skin on the side of you that faces the fire. The wife, sitting in her chair with the mending on her lap, has the whole left side of her body warmed by this fire. Her left cheek is faintly flushed. Her left hand, the one that holds the sock, is warm enough to be entirely comfortable even though the room's ambient air away from the direct influence of the hearth is cool enough that her breath would mist if she turned to face the window. This gradient, this warm side and cool side, this negotiation between fire and winter that plays out across every room, every body, every evening. In this cottage it is such a specific physical experience, and so completely foreign to most of us who have grown up in centrally heated homes, that I think it is worth pausing over. We tend to think of warmth as something total, all or nothing. You are warm or you are cold, but in this cottage, in this era, warmth was directional. It came from a source, and it radiated outward, and the closer you were to that source, the warmer you were, and the further away, the cooler. You arranged your body accordingly. You turned toward the fire when you needed heat, turned away when you needed a moment of cool air. You learned to sleep with your feet toward the hearth and your back against the cool of the wall, finding the perfect temperature in the gradient between them. What stays with me about this is how awake it must have made you to your own physical experience, how present in your body. Every evening was a quiet, ongoing conversation with warmth and cold, proximity and distance, the fire's generosity and the night's bite. You could not be anywhere but here, anywhere but now, anywhere but in the exact position of your body in relation to this particular source of light and heat. This all happened so very long ago, and yet the body's memory of firelight is ancient and deep and real. Something in us still recognizes it, something older than words, older than thought. The way the eyes soften in firelight, the way the shoulders drop, the way the breath slows and deepens and the mind unclenches itself from the day's accumulated gripping. Let that happen now, if you like. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath find its own slow rhythm. Let the day uncurl, vertebra by vertebra, from your spine. The fire knows what it is doing. It has always known. In the far corner of the room where the firelight reaches only in its most diluted amber-hazed form, the spinning wheel stands in its evening stillness. Its large wheel, nearly 2 feet in diameter, is perfectly motionless, no whisper of rotation, no gentle creak of the axle, no soft buzz of fibre drawing through skilled fingers. All day it has turned, the wife working it in the intervals between cooking and child-tending, adding to the growing cone of hand-spun wool yarn that will eventually become stockings, or a length of cloth, or more yarn for the mending basket. But now it rests. Even tools, in this household, seem to be allowed their rest when the day is done. The firelight touches the spinning wheel's spokes and rim with a particular kind of beauty the way it touches all wooden things, drawing out the grain, warming the colour, making even utilitarian objects look like they belong in a painting. Which, I suppose they do. Many painters of this era, Hogarth, Morland, the whole school of domestic genre painters who were just beginning to find their subject in ordinary English life, were fascinated by exactly this quality of firelit interior, the way the light animated the simplest spaces, the way it made the humble and the plain into something luminous. The fire knows this about itself, I think. It has always been generous in this way, giving light not just for seeing by, but for seeing with, for finding the beauty in a wooden bowl, a whitewashed wall, a woman's hands moving steadily through the work of the evening, her shadow vast and soft and companionable on the wall behind her. A log shifts, deep in the fire, just slightly a settling, a readjustment of weight as the char thickens and the structural integrity of the wood changes beneath the burning. It makes a sound, a low, soft thud, followed by a brief brightening of the coals, a small release of sparks that drift upward into the chimney's dark throat and are gone. The wife does not look up. She has heard this sound 10,000 times. It is simply the fire, continuing its work, as it has always done, as it will continue to do, long after the needle is set aside and the candle is snuffed and the last voice in this cottage has settled into the slow, steady, beloved rhythm of sleep. The fire keeps its watch, patient, warm, entirely faithful. And in the next part of this evening, I want to tell you about the children, about the particular, tender, slightly comedic, deeply moving ritual of putting 3 small people to bed in a one-room cottage where the fire is still going, and the world outside is cold, and the loft ladder is narrow, and the straw mattress awaits. But first, just a moment more, just the fire, just this warmth, just breathe. It begins, as it always begins, with a negotiation. This is the universal truth of putting children to bed in any era, in any household, in any century that has ever contained both small people and the expectation that those small people will, at some point, go willingly to sleep. The details change, the century changes, the bed changes, and the room changes, and the particular arguments deployed by the small people change with impressive creativity from one generation to the next. But the fundamental shape of the thing, the adult's gentle insistence, the child's remarkable resourcefulness in finding reasons to remain awake just a little longer, this does not change. It has not changed in 3,000 years. It will not change in 3,000 more. Tonight, the negotiation begins with the boy. He is 7, and he has been doing that particular brand of 7-year-old sleeping, the kind that is not quite sleeping, that occupies the borderland between wakefulness and unconsciousness, with the suspicious expertise of someone who is very much still aware of everything happening in the room, while maintaining plausible deniability. His head is still against the wall. His eyes are still mostly closed. But when his mother says his name quietly, with the specific intonation that means it is time, he opens his eyes with a speed that rather gives the game away. He was not asleep. He was waiting. For what, exactly, is not entirely clear. Perhaps simply for the reassurance that the room is still there, the fire and the light, and his father's presence, and the general warmth of everything. Perhaps for the slight and irrational hope that if he waited long enough, bedtime might somehow forget to come. Children in every era have harboured this hope. It never works. But it is, I think, a very human hope, the hope that a good thing, prolonged by patience and stillness, might simply continue indefinitely. His mother is patient with him. She says his name again. She tilts her head toward the ladder in the corner, a short, steep thing, more a series of wooden pegs set into a thick beam than a proper staircase, leading up through a square hole in the low ceiling to the sleeping loft above. He looks at the ladder. He looks at the fire. He performs a series of small delaying actions, adjusting his position against the wall, examining something on his sleeve, asking in a voice carefully calibrated to sound casual whether there might be any bread left. There is not. He accepts this with the dignity of someone receiving mildly disappointing but not entirely unexpected news. His mother comes to him. She crouches down to his level, that particular crouch of a mother with young children, effortless and automatic, bringing herself into his world rather than asking him to reach up into hers. She pushes the hair back from his forehead, His hair is dark and somewhat unruly, the kind of hair that never quite does what is asked of it, and she pushes it back with the same brisk tenderness she applies to everything. Not rough, not especially gentle, but warm. Warm in the specific way that a touch is warm when it comes from someone who knows you entirely and loves you without reservation. You are warm and safe, my friend. Just like this boy, settling into the care of someone who loves him. Let yourself be held like that tonight by the warmth around you, by the stillness of the room, by this slow and gentle story moving through the dark. There is nothing required of you. Just rest. Just breathe. He gets up. He crosses to the ladder with the slightly theatrical reluctance of a child who wants it noted for the record that he is complying under protest. He puts his hands on the wooden pegs and climbs 4 steps, 5 steps, and disappears through the hole in the ceiling. There is a soft thump from above, the sound of small feet on a wooden floor, the creak of a straw mattress receiving weight. Then quiet. The wife turns her attention to the younger girl, the 5-year-old, who has been watching her brother's departure, with the look of someone taking careful notes on how this negotiation was conducted and where, precisely, it went wrong. She is sitting very straight on the rag rug, her string still wound around her fingers, her expression one of alert and slightly calculating wakefulness. She is not ready. She has things to say about the matter. The things she has to say include, delivered in a voice of great reasonableness, that she is not, in fact, tired not even a little bit, that she had a thought, just now, about the string, and she needs to try one more thing with it, it will only take a moment, that her brother had longer awake time than she did, and this is demonstrably unfair and she would like it noted, that her feet are cold this last delivered, with a slight uplift of pitch that is the 5-year-old's equivalent of a trump card. Her mother listens to all of this with the expression of a woman who has heard every variation of this argument before, and finds that she cannot help it quietly, privately, entirely endearing. She takes the string gently from her daughter's fingers. She sets it in the mending basket. She picks up the small ceramic bowl of water that has been warming near the hearth, barely warm now, just the faint memory of heat, and she washes her daughter's face and hands with a cloth wrung out in this water. The cloth is soft with use. The water is just warm enough. The washing is brisk and thorough, and the girl submits to it with the particular resigned dignity of someone who has learned that resistance here is genuinely futile. This is a small moment that I find moves me more than I can quite explain. The washing of a child's face before bed. In an era without running water, where water was drawn from a well or a stream, where it was heated on the fire, where it was used and reused with careful economy, this small act of washing, this daily restoration of cleanliness before sleep, was both a practical necessity and something more. It was a ritual of transition, a physical marking of the boundary between the day's dirt and the night's rest. The warm cloth on a child's face saying, in the language of touch, the day is done. You are clean. You are cared for. You can let go now. What strikes me the most is how unchanged this moment is across all the centuries between that cottage and this one. The specific cloth, the specific water, the specific ceramic bowl, these are gone, replaced by 100 modern variations. But the mother crouching before the child, the warm cloth, the small face tipped upward, this is the same. This has always been the same, and there is something in that continuity that I find deeply, quietly consoling. We are not so different from these people. Not really. Not in the ways that matter most. The 5-year-old is lifted all warm weight and loose limbs and carried to the ladder. Her mother climbs first, one hand always on the child, and maneuvers them both up through the low ceiling into the sleeping loft above. The loft is a different world, lower even than the room below, and darker the fire's light reaches up here only as a soft, diffused amber warmth that makes the underside of the thatch roof glow faintly, like the inside of a lantern. The thatch is old and well settled, thick enough to hold considerable warmth, thick enough that the frost forming on its outer surface tonight has no chance of penetrating to the sleeping space within. The smell up here is different from the room below, less wood smoke, more wool and straw, and the warm animal smell of small sleeping bodies. The boy is already in the bed, a wide straw mattress laid on a rough wooden frame, covered with a linen sheet and 2 thick woolen blankets. The blankets are heavy and slightly coarse to the touch, woven from the same practical dark natural wool that makes up most of the fabric in this household's life. The boy is on one side, already deeply asleep or very convincingly pretending, one of the two. The wife settles her daughter into the middle of the mattress. The straw shifts and whispers beneath the movement, a sound like a very gentle rain. The girl sinks into the warmth that her brother's body has already built under the blankets, and something in her face changes immediately, that look of alert, negotiating wakefulness, softening, dissolving, giving way to something rounder and more open. The wool blanket is pulled up to her chin. Her mother tucks it not tightly, just snugly, just the specific amount of tuck that says you are held, you are enclosed, the cold is outside and you are in here. Then she goes back down the ladder for the last one, the small one. The 3-year-old who fell asleep on the rug an hour ago and has been sleeping there ever since, undisturbed and perfectly content, her cheek still pressed against the braided wool, her thumb loosely near her mouth. The wife kneels beside her for a moment, just a moment, looking at this sleeping face, the most unguarded thing in the world, the face of a sleeping child, with all its extraordinary completeness and self-sufficiency, needing nothing, wanting nothing, simply existing in its fullness and its peace. This all happened so very long ago. This small sleeping face, this mother kneeling on a braided rug before a Georgian fire, all of it held now in the gentle amber of the past, warm and still and unreachable. Nothing from that world can touch you. You are perfectly safe. Just breathe, slowly, and let the story carry you the way this mother carries her child. She lifts the girl carefully. The 3-year-old stirs slightly, a small sound, not quite a word, her face creasing for just a moment in the slight confusion of the half-woken, and then resettles against her mother's shoulder with the absolute and total trust of a very small person who is, on some level just below consciousness, completely certain that whoever is holding them is safe. She does not wake. She simply moves from the rug to her mother's arms to the loft, transferred through 3 different kinds of warmth: the fire's warmth, the warmth of being held, the warmth of the bed without ever fully surfacing into awareness. This is the most exquisite kind of sleep, I think. The sleep that holds through being moved, through the small disturbances of transition, because the body's trust is so complete that no alarm is raised. She is safe. She has always been safe. She will continue to be safe. Her sleeping self knows this so thoroughly that it does not even bother to check. Let your body know that tonight, my friend. Let it know in whatever language bodies speak to themselves in the dark that you are safe, that you are held, that nothing is required, that whatever small disturbances the night brings, they will not penetrate this warmth. Just let go, like a 3-year-old carried to bed. Just let yourself be held. Upstairs, the wife settles her youngest beside the other 2, 3 small warm bodies arranged in their sleeping geometry, the way siblings arrange themselves in a shared bed with unconscious territorial precision, each one claiming their portion of warmth and space. She tucks the blanket again. She stands for a moment with her head slightly bent beneath the low thatch, listening to the sound of them breathing. 3 children, 3 small, breathing lives, each one utterly dependent on this roof, this fire, these hands, this woman standing in the dim amber warmth of this loft. She listens. The breathing is slow, even, deep. They are all, every one of them, truly asleep. She stands there just a moment longer than she needs to. Just a moment. And then she turns, and she goes back down the ladder, and she returns to her chair, and she picks up her mending, and the needle resumes its patient work in the firelight. But something in the room is different now, quieter, stiller, more entirely itself. The cottage, with its children asleep above, has become something slightly different, not less warm, not less full, but fuller in a different way. Fuller with the specific fullness of a house that has done the work of the day and is now, quietly, entering the sacred hours of the evening, the hours that belong to the husband and the wife, the hours of the fire burning lower and the candle burning steady, and the words spoken quietly between two people who have made a life together in this small, warm, sufficient space. And it is to those hours, now, that we turn. There is a particular quality to the silence that settles over a house when the children are finally, truly asleep. It is not simply the absence of noise, though it is that too, and that alone is a not inconsiderable gift at the end of a long day. It is something more textured than mere quiet. It is a silence that has weight and warmth to it, a silence that feels earned, that carries in it the memory of all the sounds that came before the voices, the footsteps, the laughter, the small disputes, the clatter of wooden bowls, the creak of the loft ladder going up and coming down and holds them, dissolved, the way water holds the memory of salt. The husband and the wife are alone now. They are alone together, which is a different thing entirely from being simply alone. They have been alone together in this room on 10,000 evenings, or something approaching it, and they have learned the way two people learn who inhabit a small space with honesty and patience and time, exactly how to be in each other's company without requiring anything from each other that the other cannot easily give. He has moved while she was upstairs with the children. He is no longer in the armchair by the hearth. He has shifted to the table, drawn his chair close, and lit himself a small pipe, the clay bowl glowing in the dimness with each slow draw. The pipe is a modest thing, white clay, the kind sold in bundles of a dozen at any market town, cheap enough to be nearly disposable. His particular pipe is not especially new. The stem has been mended with a winding of waxed thread where it cracked some months ago, but it draws well, and the tobacco, a small measure of coarse-cut Virginia leaf bought at the village shop, fills the near end of the room with a smell that is round and brown and slightly sweet, not unpleasant. To anyone who has grown up in a house where pipes were smoked, and in Georgian England, that was most houses, most people it is, in fact, a deeply familiar and comforting smell, the smell of an adult evening, of the day's labour formally declared over. He draws on the pipe slowly. He sets it down. He picks up from the table's edge a short length of ashwood, perhaps 14 inches long, pale and smooth-grained, and a small knife. And he begins, with the same unhurried quality of attention his wife brings to her mending, to whittle. What he is making is not yet entirely clear, even to him. This is not uncommon with whittling in this era. A man with a piece of good wood and a sharp knife and a quiet evening did not always begin with a finished object in mind. Sometimes the object revealed itself in the process, in the conversation between the grain of the wood and the angle of the blade, in the gradual emergence of a form that had been waiting, latent, inside the material. He might be making a peg. He might be making a handle for something, or a simple toy for one of the children, or a small implement whose precise purpose will only become apparent when it is nearly finished. For now, he is simply removing what does not need to be there. Thin curls of pale wood fall onto the table around him. They catch the candlelight. The tallow candle has been moved to the table now, and its small circle of light encompasses both the table and the man, and they glow briefly in that light before settling. They smell of fresh wood, clean and faintly sweet, the interior of the ash branch newly exposed to the air for the first time. His wife is back in her chair. The mending basket is on her lap. The darning continues. For a while, a comfortable while, a while that neither of them is measuring or counting, they simply exist in parallel. His knife, her needle, his tobacco smoke rising slowly in the still air above the table, her shadow moving on the wall with each small movement of the needle. The fire between them, lower now than it was, but still generous, still warm, still doing its faithful work. I find this so quietly moving. This is a kind of intimacy that I think does not get enough attention. Not the intimacy of conversation, or of touch, or of the dramatic shared experience, but the intimacy of simply being in a room together and being, both of you, entirely at ease. Being so comfortable in another person's presence that you need not perform for them, need not fill the silence with words, need not orient yourself toward them constantly to confirm that the connection is still there. You can simply be separately, quietly, fully yourselves, and the connection is so thoroughly established, so deep and so settled that it needs no tending in this moment. It tends itself. You are warm, my friend, completely at ease. Let the quiet of this room settle around you, that same quality of easeful silence, the kind that asks nothing of you, that simply holds you, gently, the way these two people hold each other in their comfortable parallel quiet. She speaks first. Her voice, when she does speak, is low, not whispering, but modulated, instinctively, to the pitch that belongs to the evening, to the sleeping children above, to the general hush that has settled over everything. She says something about the pig, whether there is enough fodder, whether the cold snap coming will cause a problem. Her words are practical. Her tone is entirely ordinary. There is not a grain of poetry or drama in the question. He considers it. He sets down the knife for a moment. He speaks a few words. Yes, or probably, or perhaps. Something in the middle register of reassurance that is not quite a promise, but is more than a dismissal. He has thought about this already. He has a plan, or the outline of a plan, or at least the confidence that comes from having managed this kind of problem before and finding it manageable. She nods. She goes back to the mending. The exchange is over in perhaps 20 seconds. And yet, what stays with me about it is the way it functions not just as an exchange of information about a pig and its winter fodder, but as something else, something running beneath the surface of the words like a current beneath still water. It is a small act of trust. She raises the concern. He meets it. The world, having been briefly uncertain, is briefly stabilized. The needle can continue. The wood can continue to be shaped. The evening can go on. This is what long partnership looks like, I think. Not the grand gestures and the declared devotions, those belong to courtship and to ceremony. But this, the daily, low-key, entirely reliable practice of meeting each other's concerns with attention and care. The taking seriously of small things, because small things are the substance of a life, and if you tend the small things with love, the large things tend to find their shape. He picks up the knife again. Another thin curl of ash wood falls to the table. The pipe sits in a small clay holder, a simple ring of fired clay, homemade, cracked and repaired, and the tobacco has settled to a slow, continuous coal. The smoke is very thin now, a pale thread rising straight up in the still air, and then dispersing into the general warmth of the room. After a time, it might be 10 minutes, it might be 20. Time in this room has a particular elastic quality, stretching and compressing according to the rhythms of the work, rather than the ticking of any clock. She says something else. Something about the eldest boy. Something about a cough she noticed, a slight thickness in his breathing when she tucked him in. Not alarmed, she is not a woman who alarms easily. Having raised 3 children through the various illnesses and stumbles and scares that are simply part of the texture of childhood in this era, but noting it, naming it to her husband, the way you name a thing to someone you trust, because naming it makes it smaller, because sharing the weight of a worry immediately halves that weight. He listens. He does not rush to reassure her. He does not wave it away. He simply listens, and then he says that he noticed it too. At supper, he says they will watch it. He says they have some dried thyme that can be made into a tea, or a steam if it worsens. She nods again. The worry, named and shared, subsides. This all happened so very long ago. This concern, this small maternal watchfulness, this husband who listens, all of it resting now in the long, kind past, where everything has already been resolved, where the boy certainly recovered, where the cough was nothing that time, tea, and a warm bed could not address. Nothing from that world can reach you. You are entirely safe, and everything in this story has already turned out well. Just breathe. Let the room hold you. The fire burns lower still. The logs are down to their last substantial burning now, the outer surfaces mostly ash and char, the core still glowing, but the flames almost gone. Just the occasional small blue flicker along the surface of the coal bed, where gas still releases and burns for a brief, spectral second before vanishing. The room's temperature, which has been maintained steadily through the evening, is just beginning to soften at the edges. Not cold, not yet, not while the coals are still radiating their deep, patient heat, but the first suggestion of what will come when the fire is finally banked. It is nearly time. He finishes with the wood, sets down the knife, turns the piece in his hands, looks at it with the particular squinting assessment of someone evaluating work in low light. Whatever it is further along now, more itself than it was. He blows the wood dust from it, sets it on the table beside the curls of shaving, and rolls his shoulders in a slow, private gesture of a body acknowledging the day. She finishes not the mending in its entirety, which will take several more evenings, but her session. She reaches the natural stopping point that anyone who does careful handwork learns to recognize. The point where the eyes are growing uncertain in the low light, where the hands are tiring in a way that makes further precision slightly unreliable. She does not push past this point. She threads the needle into the felt pad. She folds the darned sock and tucks it into the basket. She rests the basket on the table and straightens in her chair, one hand going to the small of her back in the gesture of someone releasing the posture they have held for an hour. They look at each other, briefly, comfortably, in the way of two people who have looked at each other across 10,000 small evenings and found, each time, something steady and reliable in what they see. He says something low and quiet. She smiles, a small smile. Private, not performed for anyone, not the smile you show the world, but the one that simply happens on your face when something lands warmly in your chest. He moves his chair back from the table. He goes to the fire. And now it is time for the last of the evening's great rituals, the banking of the fire, the snuffing of the candle, the settling of the house into its night. But before all of that, before the careful management of embers and ash, before the darkness, there is one more thing. One thing I want to tell you about, because it is, in its way, the most intimate and the most characteristically Georgian of all the evening's moments. The candle on the table is the only light now, besides the deep glowing coals. Its flame is steady in the still air, small and warm and perfectly certain of itself. And in that small circle of candlelight, in this cottage at the end of a long Georgian day, the husband and the wife are briefly, perfectly, entirely at home. Let us look at the candle for a moment. Just the candle. It is sitting on the table in a simple holder, a short, heavy stub of iron twisted at the base into a flat disc that prevents it from tipping, with a spike at the top onto which the candle has been pressed. The candle itself is perhaps 6 inches tall, slightly thicker than a thumb, the colour of old ivory. Its surface is not smooth and perfect the way a modern candle is smooth and perfect. It is slightly irregular, slightly uneven, with faint horizontal lines running around its circumference where successive layers of tallow were built up during its making. At its top, the flame small, upright, burning with a steadiness that is almost uncanny, given how much warmth and light it manages to produce from something so slight, casts its circle of yellow-white brightness onto the table, and the hands and the faces of the two, people sitting within its reach. This candle is tallow, not beeswax. Beeswax candles are for churches, for the houses of the wealthy, for special occasions. Beeswax is expensive, and it burns clean and bright and without odour, and it belongs to a different world than this one. This candle is tallow-rendered animal fat, most likely from beef or mutton, melted and purified, and poured or dipped around a cotton wick until it reaches a serviceable size. Tallow candles were the everyday candle of the Georgian working household. They were made at home, in batches, in the autumn when animals were slaughtered and fat was available, and the long dark months of winter stretched ahead, requiring all the light that could be provided. The making of tallow candles was itself a whole day's work. The fat rendered slowly in a large pot over the fire, clarified and strained until it ran clear, was kept liquid in a wide, shallow basin. The wicks, made from loosely twisted cotton threads, were tied at regular intervals along a stick, and the stick was dipped repeatedly into the liquid tallow, raised and held in the cool air to harden, dipped again, raised again, the candles growing in diameter, with each successive coating, the way icicles grow in reverse, built up, layer by patient layer, into something solid and useful and warm. A good candle-making session in autumn might produce enough candles to last several weeks. They were stored carefully away from mice, away from heat that might cause them to soften and deform, in a cool, dark corner where they would keep their shape and their utility through the months ahead. They were not wasted. A tallow candle in a Georgian farmworker's household was not switched on and off without thought. It was lit when it was genuinely needed, when the fire's light alone was not sufficient for close work, when the evening had advanced past the point where daylight through the shutter was any help at all. And it was managed with the same careful economy that governed everything in this household. The wick was trimmed regularly. The burned, blackened tip of the wick, if allowed to grow too long, would cause the candle to gutter and smoke and waste itself in uneven burning. A little pair of wick scissors, or simply the pinch of a wetted finger and thumb, kept the flame clean and efficient and as long-lasting as possible. I find this quietly extraordinary. The attention paid to a single candle flame, the knowledge required to burn a candle well to get the maximum light and the maximum duration from something so small and so carefully made. It speaks to a relationship with material things that is, I think, both more intimate and more respectful than most of what we bring to our own, more casually acquired possessions. You are safe, my friend, warm and perfectly still. Let the candle flame be your companion in this moment, not this particular flame, 3 centuries and an ocean away, but the idea of it. The small, warm, steady certainty of a single point of light in the dark. Let it be enough. Let it be, in this moment, everything. The quality of tallow candlelight is specific. It is warmer than beeswax, slightly more orange, slightly less white. Where beeswax gives something approaching a clean, cool brightness, tallow gives warmth a yellower, more amber light that is less good for reading fine print, and rather better for everything else, for seeing faces, for the general illumination of a room, for the particular intimate business of an evening at home, and it has a smell. This is something that is impossible to convey fully in words, but worth attempting nonetheless. Tallow candles, burning, have a faint animal smell, not unpleasant exactly, but present. A slightly fatty, slightly meaty undertone beneath the normal smell of burning wick and hot wax. It is a smell that would have been entirely familiar, entirely unremarkable, to anyone living in Georgian England. The smell of a household going about its evening, the smell of light and warmth and occupied rooms. Today it is gone from most of our lives, replaced by paraffin or soy or clean-burning beeswax, and the absence of it is one of those small, invisible ways in which our sensory world has been quietly altered from the sensory world of our ancestors. The candle on this table has been burning for perhaps 2 hours. It has lost an inch of its height in that time, the tallow melting down and pooling briefly in the slight hollow around the wick before being drawn upward by capillary action into the flame itself, consumed continuously, the candle slowly becoming light and heat, and a thin trace of smoke that rises and is gone. Around the base of the wick, a small translucent pool of liquid tallow has formed, not enough to spill over the sides, just a shallow lake of warm fat, slightly amber at its edges where it catches the flame, perfectly still in the still air of this room. It is beautiful, in its small way, a tiny landscape of light and matter in miniature, something to look at if your eyes want something to rest on that requires no effort, no interpretation, no response. Just look. Just let your eyes find a soft focus, the way eyes soften naturally in low light and stillness, the way they found the same soft focus 10,000 evenings ago in cottages and chambers across Georgian England. Wherever a candle was burning and a person was quietly approaching the threshold of sleep. The husband is at the fire now, preparing for the banking. We will follow that process in full in a little while, and I want to give it the attention it deserves. But for this moment he has paused, his back to the table, crouching before the hearth with his hands resting on his knees, looking into the coals with that same 1,000-yard stillness that the fire seems to induce in everyone who sits before it long enough. The candlelight reaches him only partially his back and left shoulder in the amber circle, his face turned away toward the deeper light of the coals. He is half firelight, half candlelight, 2 kinds of Georgian illumination, both warm, both ancient, both doing what they have always done. His wife, watching him from her chair, sees this without particularly registering it as something to be seen. It is simply the room, simply the evening, simply the man she has shared this life with, lit in the particular way this room lights things, known in the particular way long familiarity knows a person. There is nothing to analyze, nothing to evaluate. He is there, and she is here, and the candle is between them, and this is how evenings end. I want to tell you something about candles in this era that I find deeply moving, and that I think about sometimes when the modern world seems very loud and very bright and very insistent. In Georgian England, and for centuries before, and for a few generations after, until gas lighting began to transform first the cities and then, slowly, the countryside, darkness was a normal part of every evening. Not a problem to be solved, not an absence to be aggressively filled. Just the natural condition of the world after the sun went down, managed partly by firelight, partly by candlelight, but never fully overcome, never reduced to nothing the way our modern electric nights have reduced it. People slept, in this era, differently than we do. There is historical evidence gathered from diaries and account books, and the occasional detailed memoir that the common pattern of sleep before electric light was not the single 8-hour block that we tend to think of as normal. Many people slept in 2 segments, separated by a wakeful hour or 2 in the middle of the night. First sleep, then a quiet period of wakefulness, sometimes used for prayer, or light domestic work, or simply for lying in the dark thinking gentle thoughts, and then second sleep, carrying through to morning. This middle-of-the-night wakefulness was apparently not experienced as insomnia or disruption. It was simply part of the rhythm. The body knew it. The culture accommodated it. There was even a name for it. The first sleep was simply the first sleep, and the waking interval was sometimes called the watch, though not with any military connotation. Just the watch. The quiet middle time. What stays with me about this is how it changes the picture of nighttime in Georgian England. Not a long, solid, unbroken darkness, but something more nuanced. A night with a shape to it, with a rhythm, with a middle space where a candle might be lit again for a little while, where prayers might be said or a quiet thought followed to its conclusion, and then darkness again, and the second, often deeper sleep that carried through to dawn. This all happened so very long ago, and so gently. These rhythms of light and dark, of sleeping and waking and sleeping again, they belong to a world that has softened now into history, into warmth, into the kind of story you can carry into your own sleep without anything sharp or urgent in it. Nothing from that world can disturb you. Just the candlelight, just the warmth, just this. Let your breath slow, just a little more. Let your eyes grow heavy. The candle on the table is doing what candles have always done, burning steadily, giving what light it has, asking nothing, expecting nothing, simply present and warm and entirely reliable in its smallness. There is a word I keep wanting to use when I think about candlelight in a Georgian cottage, and the word is intimate. Not intimate in the narrow sense, not intimate only between 2 people, but intimate in the broader, older sense, close, personal, immediate. Candlelight does not illuminate a room. It illuminates a corner of a room, a face, a pair of hands, a table's surface. It draws a circle around you and says, "Here. This is the world. This circle of warmth. This is enough to see by. This is enough." And in that enoughness, in that deliberate, practical, beautiful limitation, there is a kind of gift. The gift of a world made small enough to be fully present in. Made small enough that nothing outside the circle demands your attention tonight. Not the frost on the thatch. Not the dark fields beyond the village. Not the long complexity of tomorrow. Just the candle. Just the circle. Just this room. These 2 people. This fire breathing its last good heat into the evening air. The flame bends, slightly, just once, and just barely some small movement of air in the room, a shift in the chimney's drawer, a ghost of draught from somewhere. The circle of light stretches and contracts in the same instant, and then steadies again. The candle goes on burning, patient, warm, and entirely sure of itself, as it has always been, as it will be, for a little while longer yet, until the last of the evening's work is done. The pot has been on the hob since morning. Not the same pot of pottage they ate for supper that has been ladled out and finished, the bowls wiped clean, the meal completed and settled into the comfortable past of the evening. But the pot itself, the iron cooking pot, wide and deep and heavy as a small child, hanging from the crane arm above the fire, has not left its place above the heat since the wife swung it into position before breakfast and built the morning fire up beneath it. It is, in many ways, the most important object in this cottage, not the most beautiful, not the most precious, in any financial sense, though a good iron pot was, in fact, a significant investment for a farm worker's household, not something acquired casually, and not something replaced without considerable difficulty, but the most important, in the sense of most central to life, to daily, ongoing, continuous life, because everything that this household ate and drank and had warm every meal, every cup of small ale heated on a cold morning, every bowl of gruel, every portion of pottage, every cup of herb tea, every warm water for washing faces and cleaning wounds and softening dried bread, all of it passed through this pot. It was the household's engine of nourishment, its constant, faithful, blackened, beautiful engine. The pot is cast iron, made at a foundry, smooth on the inside from years of use and seasoning, rough and slightly pebbled on the outside with the characteristic texture of cast metal. It is black, entirely, thoroughly, irreversibly black, the black of accumulated seasoning and wood smoke and decades of firelit use. The kind of black that is not a colour but a depth, a surface that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. It has two short handles at its rim, and a small pour lip on one side, and a domed lid that fits it well enough to hold in steam when needed, and can be lifted with the hook of an iron tool kept hanging near the hearth for exactly this purpose. When it was new, and this pot is not new, it was not new when this family acquired it, passed from someone's household to theirs through one of the small domestic transactions that are invisible to history when it was new, it would have required seasoning, the inside rubbed with fat and heated repeatedly to build up the layers of polymerized oil that make cast iron nearly non-stick and prevent rust. This was a patient process, a weeks-long courtship between cook and pot, and when it was done, the pot was ready for a lifetime of service. This pot has had its lifetime of service and then some. Inside it right now, in the last hours of this November evening, is a simple broth, not the pottage of supper that was a more substantial thing, thick with barley and leeks and salt pork. This is thinner, a keeping broth, a plain liquor of water, and a small piece of bone, a knuckle of something most likely, whatever was available that has been simmering since midday, drawing out the gelatin and the faint mineral sweetness of the bone, producing something that is more than water and less than stock. In the morning it will be used as the base for the next day's pottage, or enriched with oatmeal into a thin porridge, or simply drunk as a warming cup against the cold of rising before dawn. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever wasted. I want to stay with this for a moment, because I think it is one of the most quietly radical things about cooking in this era, and about Georgian farm worker domestic life more broadly. This absolute commitment to continuity, to the using up of everything, to the principle that the pot is never truly empty, but always in the process of becoming the next thing. The bone that made tonight's broth was already in its second or third use, a bone that had perhaps already been boiled once. Its first round of flavour given to an earlier pot, now yielding its remaining richness to this one. The vegetable trimmings from this week's cooking the leek tops, the outer leaves of the cabbage, the parsley stems, went into the pot to add what they had to give. Even the water used to wash the bowls, slightly starchy from the pottage residue, might find its way into the pot's orbit. This is a cooking philosophy built on the understanding that flavour and nourishment are not dramatic, finite things that arrive in large quantities from a market or a larder and must be consumed quickly before they are gone. They are slow, accumulated, patient things, built up over days and weeks in a pot that is always warm, always working, always in the process of transforming the humble and the plain into something sustaining and good. You are safe, my friend, warm and perfectly comfortable. Let the smell of that broth reach you if you like warm and faintly savoury, rising with the steam from the pot's slightly open lid, filling the upper reaches of this low-ceilinged room with something that is the opposite of cold and the opposite of empty. Let it be a comfort. Let the whole room be a comfort, the way rooms where something good has been cooking all day are always a comfort. The pot's lid lifts slightly with each small bubble that rises from the broth, a gentle, intermittent, barely perceptible trembling, as if the pot itself is breathing, which, in its way, it is. It exhales little puffs of steam that catch the candlelight and disperse almost immediately, too slight to be seen for more than a moment, gone before they reach the ceiling. The sound it makes is the softest possible cooking sound, not the aggressive rolling boil of something being actively cooked, but the barely there simmer of something keeping, maintaining, holding itself at the edge of heat. A sound like a very quiet, very patient heartbeat. The wife gets up from her chair. She crosses to the hearth 2 steps, 3 at most. The room is not large, and she picks up the long-handled wooden spoon that hangs on a nail beside the fireplace. The spoon is dark from years of stirring hot liquids, its bowl stained in gradations from pale wood at the handle's end to near black where it meets the contents of the pot. She lifts the lid carefully, angling it away from her so the steam rises away from her face, and she stirs. 1 slow revolution. 2. Checking the level the broth has reduced slightly through the day, and she adds a small measure of water from the earthenware jug that sits on the shelf nearby, pouring it in a thin stream that makes the simmering briefly more active, briefly more vocal, before subsiding back into its quiet. She replaces the lid. She hangs the spoon back on its nail. The whole transaction takes perhaps 40 seconds, but what strikes me, watching her do it, is the degree to which this small act connects her to an extraordinarily long chain of human women doing exactly this thing. Standing at a fire, lifting a lid, stirring, adjusting, tending. The specific fire changes clay pot to iron pot to steel pot to ceramic, open hearth to iron range to gas burner to induction hob. But the action, the attention, the care of the tending, this moves through time with remarkable consistency. She is part of something ancient. She knows it in the wordless way that people know the deep things about themselves, not as an idea but as a bodily reality, a fact in the muscles and the hands. She is also doing something that I think has been profoundly undervalued by the way we have tended to write history. The keeping of the pot, this continuous, skilled, patient, essential work, was the thing that stood between a household and hunger, not the dramatic work of ploughing and planting and harvest, important as those were, not the visible, countable, marketable work that left a trace in ledgers and parish records, but this, the daily, unglamorous, irreplaceable work of turning available ingredients into nourishment, of managing the fire and the pot and the larder with the particular combination of skill and economy and creative problem-solving that good domestic management required. Historians have come to understand this much better in recent decades. The scholarship around women's work in pre-industrial England, patient, careful, revelatory scholarship, has helped us see what was always there but too easily overlooked, that the domestic economy of a farm worker's cottage was a genuine economy, requiring genuine skill, producing genuine value, sustaining genuine lives. The woman who managed a household like this one was not doing something lesser than the man who managed the fields. She was doing something different and equally essential, and in many ways considerably more technically varied, requiring knowledge of nutrition and medicine and food preservation and textile production, and animal husbandry and childcare, and the management of fire, all at once, all every day. What stays with me is the particular intelligence required by the pot. To cook well with limited ingredients, limited fuel, limited time, and no refrigeration to make something satisfying and nourishing from what is available, day after day, through the long repetitive cycle of the seasons, this is not a simple thing. It requires knowledge of how flavors develop and how they can be coaxed from unlikely sources. It requires timing and judgment and the willingness to improvise. It requires a relationship with food that is, in the truest sense of the word, intimate, close, attentive, ongoing, built on direct experience, rather than the mediation of recipes and measurements. This all happened so very long ago. This fire, this pot, this patient broth keeping itself warm through the evening hours, all of it resting softly in the past, warm and still and resolved. Nothing from that world needs anything from you right now. You are completely at rest. Just breathe, slowly, and let the warmth of this room settle into you, the way warmth settles into a pot of broth gently, gradually, from all sides at once. The smell of this cottage, in this moment, is a layered thing. At the bottom, always, wood smoke the base note, the constant, the smell that has seeped into every surface and every fabric in this room over years and years of daily fires. Above that, the faint animal warmth of tallow candle, and threading through both of these, rising from the pot, the savoury ghost of the broth, that specific, comforting, ancient smell of something good being kept warm against the cold. A smell that says, in the language of sensation rather than words, there is enough, there is warmth, there is food, you are provided for. The husband has come back from the fire. He sits again at the table, his hands around a cup, a simple earthenware cup, holding a small amount of the warm broth his wife has just ladled out. Not a meal, just a warmth, just a cup of something hot to take into the last part of the evening. He wraps his large, scarred hands around the cup and holds it, and the steam rises between his face and the candlelight, briefly softening his features, briefly making him look younger, or older, or simply more himself. He drinks slowly. The broth is plain and honest, warm and slightly salted. It tastes of bone and water and time. It tastes, in the deepest sense, of this household, of everything this pot has held and given, everything these walls have contained, everything this fire has made possible over the years and years and years of this ordinary, irreplaceable life. He sets the cup down. He looks at the fire. The coals are deep now dark red at their surfaces, nearly spent in their visible flames, but still radiating a steady, substantial heat that the room has absorbed and held. The pot above them continues its near silence. The broth continues to breathe its small, patient breaths. And outside, just beyond the shutter, just beyond the stone walls, something has changed. Something quiet and cold and entirely beautiful has begun to happen to the world, and I want to take you there, just for a little while. Not to leave the warmth, never to leave the warmth, but to understand it better by standing briefly, together, at the edge of the cold. Let us step outside for a moment, just a moment, not to be cold, or rather, not only to be cold, not to linger in it, not to suffer it, but to stand briefly in the dark and the frost, and look back at the cottage from the outside, to see it as a traveller might see it, coming along the lane in the dark, that small, low, stone-walled building with its deep thatch roof and its one-lit window, its thread of smoke rising from the chimney into the winter sky. To understand what it means, from the outside, to have a light in a window. The lane is frozen. Not deeply, it has only been truly cold for a few days, and the hard frosts of January are still a month or more away. But the mud that has been soft and clinging all through the wet weeks of October has stiffened now, overnight, into something firm and ridged and uneven. The ruts left by cartwheels, the impressions of horses' hooves, the boot prints of 100 daily passages along this lane, all of it arrested mid-motion, mid-softness, by the cold, frozen in its shapes like a record of all the movement that passed through here on warmer days. Walking on it would be treacherous in the dark. The surface gives no warning of where it dips or rises, where a frozen rut is deep enough to twist an ankle, where a puddle has become a disk of black ice, smooth and without friction and entirely invisible against the dark earth. But there is no one walking on it tonight. The lane is empty. The village, what little of it exists in this particular scattering of cottages, and a church tower and a mill at the stream's bend, is dark and still. Most households have banked their fires by now, or will do so within the hour. The church is dark. The mill is still. The blacksmith's forge, which had been breathing smoke all afternoon as he worked on a harness repair, went cold at dusk. There are a few other cottage windows where a faint light shows a candle, or the glow of banked coals through a shutter's gap, but they are far enough apart, and the night is dark enough that each one seems an isolated thing. each one a small, separate act of human warmth holding itself against the surrounding dark. The sky above all of this is extraordinary. On a clear, frost-sharp November night in rural England in the 18th century, with no artificial light for miles in any direction, no street lamps, no distant glow of a city on the horizon, no lit motorway, no airplane blinking slowly overhead, the sky is simply full of stars. Not the handful of bright ones visible through the light pollution of our modern nights. All of them, the full, uncensored, slightly overwhelming totality of a pre-electric sky. The Milky Way is visible, that broad, soft smear of concentrated starlight running across the zenith, so dense in its centre that it looks less like individual stars and more like a luminous fog, a river of light that the eye keeps trying to focus into separate points and cannot quite manage. Around it, the individual stars of the winter sky are out in their full brightness. Orion rising in the southeast, the three-star belt perfectly level, the great nebula below it faintly visible to a patient eye. The Pleiades above, a little cluster of blue-white stars so close together that counting them precisely requires more than a casual glance. And to the north, unwavering, the North Star, the fixed point around which everything else slowly, imperceptibly rotates through the long hours of the night. These stars would be known, not by their classical names, necessarily Betelgeuse, Rigel, Aldebaran, those belong to scholars and sailors and the learned, but by their shapes and their positions and their seasonal meanings. The man in this cottage, who has worked outdoors all his life, would know the winter sky the way he knows the lie of the fields he ploughs, not as something studied, but as something inhabited. The stars tell him where he is in the year. They tell him, on a clear night, roughly what the time is. They tell him, in the ways that country people read the sky, something about what weather may be coming. Tonight the sky is clear and cold and absolutely still. The frost is continuing its quiet, methodical work on everything within its reach. The thatch of the cottage roof is taking on a faint silvery glitter, where the moisture in its surface has frozen and caught the starlight. Each straw, each reed, each layered wave of the deep-cut thatch now carries a rim of ice crystals so fine they are barely visible. Barely there, just a faint luminescence that makes the roof look as though it has been very lightly dusted with something precious. The gate to the small front yard, a gate of rough-hewn timber, its wood grey and silver with age, has a rime of frost along its top rail. The grass within the yard stands stiff and slightly luminous. The bare branches of the hedgerow along the lane hold their ice crystals in perfect stillness, each branch and each twig outlined in cold white, the whole mass of the hedge transformed from its daytime tangle of brown and grey into something sharper, more geometric, more quietly beautiful. You are safe, my friend. Completely warm. We are only visiting the cold, observing it, appreciating it, understanding what it means for the warmth we left behind. Your body is perfectly comfortable. Your breath is slow and easy. The frost cannot reach you here. The pig in the lean-to at the back of the cottage stirs. Slightly. It is a young animal acquired in spring, fattened through summer and autumn on kitchen scraps and whatever else came its way, and not long now from the slaughter that is the inescapable end of this particular relationship. But tonight it is alive and adequately warm in its small shelter, bedded on straw, its body heat a small and reliable source of additional warmth in the lean-to's enclosed space. It shifts, repositions, releases a long, slow breath that briefly clouds the cold air and settles again. The chickens in their small coop are motionless roosted on their perch, heads tucked beneath wings, the fluffed insulation of their feathers doing the remarkable work of maintaining near-tropical warmth at their skin's surface while the world around them freezes. They are, in their way, beautifully engineered for exactly this. They are fine. Everything back here, behind the cottage, is as it should be, as it was left, and as it will be found tomorrow morning when the wife comes out in the grey pre-dawn to let the chickens out and check on the pig and begin the day's water hauling. But now, I want you to look at the cottage from out here. From the front, from the lane, from the cold. Look at the window. The shutter is mostly closed, a practical necessity against the cold, against the draught, against the night, but it is not perfectly sealed. A thin line of light escapes at the edge where the shutter meets its frame, a warm amber thread, no thicker than a knitting needle, running the height of the shutter and casting a faint, brief warmth on the stone wall beside it. Just that thin line, just that tiny, barely visible escape of candlelight from a closed shutter. And yet standing here in the dark, in the frost, on this empty frozen lane, it is the most compelling thing in the entire landscape. I find this moves me more than I can easily explain. That thin line of light in the dark, what it means, what it has always meant, to be outside, in the cold, in the dark, and to see at a distance, through a shutter, the evidence of warmth and light and inhabited space, the evidence that someone is in there, that the fire is going, that the candle is lit, that the stone walls are holding something precious against the night. This is one of the oldest human experiences, one of the deepest and most instinctive recognitions, the recognition of shelter from a distance, the visual signal readable across darkness and distance without a single word that says, here, in here, warmth is in here. You could come in from the cold. What stays with me is how universal this is across all the centuries of human life in cold climates. Long before this cottage was built, long before Georgian England, long before England, people saw a light in a dark landscape and felt this same thing, this same pull toward the warm, this same profound, wordless recognition of shelter as one of the fundamental goods of human existence. And long after this cottage, long after the tallow candle burned down and the fire went cold, and the family that lived here moved on, and eventually the stone walls were absorbed back into the landscape, long after all of that, people would still see a light in a dark window and feel this thing. You feel it now, perhaps, the memory of it, the instinctive recognition of what a lit window means, what a warm room means, what it means to be inside while the frost does its work on the world outside. This all happened so very long ago. This frost, this lane, this thin line of light at the shutter's edge, all of it resting now in the deep, calm past where everything has already been resolved, where the cold has already been waited out, where the morning has already come. Nothing from that world can reach you. You are warm, you are sheltered, you are completely, entirely, perfectly inside. Let's go back in. The cold has done its work on us. It has shown us what the warmth means. By contrast, by the simple eloquence of standing outside it for a moment, we know, now, what it means to be in that room. We know what that thin line of candlelight says to the dark. We push the door open, and the warmth comes out to meet us, all at once, all of it at once, the air, the smell, the soft amber light, the particular quality of a room where a fire has been burning all day, and two people have been living and breathing and keeping each other company all evening. It envelops us at the threshold, the way warmth always envelops you when you come in from the cold, not gradually, not by degrees, but immediately. Present, here, a whole different world offered to the body in an instant. The wife looks up from her chair. The husband looks up from his cup. Neither of them says anything. We are just back. The room is just the room. The fire is just the fire. Everything is as we left it, the pot on the hob, the candle on the table, the mending basket resting at the chair's side where she has set it down. But after the cold, after the frost and the dark lane, and the frozen thatch and the stars, and that thin, brave, beautiful line of light at the shutter's edge, after all of that, the room is different, more itself, more emphatically, unmistakably, irreducibly itself, warm, and we are in it, safe, and outside the frost continues its patient, silent, beautiful work, and inside the husband has set down his cup, and he is moving now, slowly, toward the hearth, and it is time, at last, for the banking of the fire. He kneels before the fire, just that first, just the simple, ancient, unhurried act of a man lowering himself onto one knee before the hearth, his right knee on the stone, his left foot flat on the floor, his large hands coming to rest on his thighs as he settles into the position and simply looks, for a moment, at what is there. The fire in its evening state is not the fire of supper time. It has come a long way since then. The logs that were burning tall and bright 2 hours ago have given themselves almost entirely to heat and light and the slow transformation into char. What remains in the hearth now is a deep, wide, glowing bed of coals, not the pale, ashy coals of a fire nearly spent, but the deep red, densely glowing coals of a hardwood fire at its most concentrated. Oak coals, dense and heavy and rich with stored heat, radiating outward with a steady, generous, entirely reliable warmth that the room has been absorbing for hours and will continue to absorb for hours more, even after the visible part of this process is complete. There are no real flames left, or almost none, just the occasional small, brief, spectral tongue of blue and orange that flickers along the coal bed surface when a pocket of gas releases from deep within the material, burns for a moment in the oxygen above it, and is gone. These small ghost flames are almost transparent. They are more like suggestions of flames than actual flames. The memory of burning, the very last performance of a fire that has otherwise settled into something quieter and deeper and more internal. The man watches them for a moment. He is in no hurry. Banking a fire is not a task that rewards hurrying. It is a task that rewards patience and attention and a particular kind of quiet deliberateness that seems to come naturally to people who have grown up tending fires and understand, in their bodies rather than their minds, that the fire is not an object to be managed but a process to be accompanied. He reaches for the tools. Beside the hearth, on a small iron stand, hang the fire tools, a poker, a small shovel, and a brush. Plain things, practical things, without ornament. The poker is perhaps 18 inches long, its tip slightly bent from use, its handle worn smooth at the grip from the pressure of many hands over many years. He takes it now, and with the particular, practiced gentleness of someone who knows exactly how much force is needed and no more, he begins to move the coals. What he is doing is gathering them, drawing the coal bed inward toward the centre of the hearth, pulling the outer pieces, which have cooled slightly in the hours since the main burning, toward the centre, toward the deepest and most densely packed part of the bed, where the heat is most concentrated. He works slowly, deliberately, the poker's tip nudging rather than pushing, guiding rather than forcing, the coals rolling and settling against each other with soft, percussive little sounds, a dry, brittle clicking, like stones turning in a stream, but warmer, slower, with a faint crumbling quality where the more fragile pieces of char break and compress. The light from the coals pulses with each movement. When the poker disturbs the surface, when a coal is turned over to expose a face that has been resting against another coal, and is therefore even more intensely hot, less exposed to the cooling air, the light brightens briefly, a sudden deepening of orange to near white, a pulse of intensified heat that reaches out from the hearth like a warm hand pressed briefly against the face. And then the coal settles, and the surface re-establishes its equilibrium, and the glow returns to its steady, patient amber red. He does this slowly, carefully, through the whole coal bed, gathering, concentrating, building the core. You are warm, my friend, completely, deeply warm. Let the rhythm of this find you, the slow, deliberate gathering, the patient tending, the sense of something being carefully held and preserved. Let your own warmth gather, the way these coals gather, drawing inward, concentrating, settling into a steady, reliable, self-sustaining glow. Nothing required, nothing asked. Just the warmth doing what warmth does, tended by steady and gentle hands. Now the ash. He sets down the poker and takes up the small shovel. From the ash box at the side of the hearth, a shallow recess in the stone, where the accumulated ash from many fires has been raked and stored, he takes a careful shovelful. The ash is pale grey, almost white at the surface, soft and fine and slightly warm to the touch from its proximity to the heat. It smells of nothing, or almost nothing, the burned-away ghost of wood, all its volatile compounds long since consumed, leaving only this inert, mineral residue. He carries it to the gathered coal bed, and here is where the art of it lives, in the laying on of the ash. Not too much, not too little, not dumped carelessly over the coals in a way that would smother them entirely and extinguish the heat you are trying to preserve, but laid on applied, really with a careful, even hand, a thin blanket of ash drawn gently across the surface of the coal bed from one side to the other. The ash falls softly, silently, disappearing into the glow, briefly darkening it as it settles, and then the glow reasserting itself through the thin grey layer, visible still but muted now, banked down, contained. What the ash does is remarkable when you understand it. It acts as insulation. A thin layer of ash over the surface of a coal bed dramatically slows the rate at which the coals burn, because it restricts the supply of oxygen to the coal's surface. Without air, the burning slows to something so gradual as to be almost imperceptible. The coals are not extinguished, they continue to hold their heat, locked inside the dense carbon structure of the char, sustained by the tiny amount of oxygen that permeates the ash layer. They will be there in the morning, not as living flame, not as glowing red coal, but as a bed of dark, warm, faintly orange-tinted material that, when exposed to fresh air and a little encouragement, will come back to life. The ember that was coaxed from under the ash this morning, the one that the wife knelt before in the cold pre-dawn and breathed back into flame, that ember came from exactly this process. From a coal bed banked last night, preserved through the long hours of darkness, waiting patiently under its blanket of ash for the moment when it would be needed again. This is a continuity of fire, a chain of warmth connecting morning to evening to morning, day after day through the long weeks of winter. The same fire, not the same flames, not the same wood, but the same heat, passed forward, handed on, preserved through the night, the way a story is preserved through the telling of it. I find this so quietly extraordinary. In an era before matches will not arrive in ordinary English life until the 1830s, and this is the 1750s. Keeping the fire going was not merely a comfort, but a genuine practical necessity. Relighting a fire from cold, using flint and steel and dry tinder, it was entirely possible but time-consuming, and not always reliable on a damp November morning when the tinder was slightly moist and the flint needed 3 or 4 strikes before the spark would catch. The banked fire was insurance. It was the household's hedge against the cold. It carried warmth, its thread of continuity between the last act of one day and the first act of the next. The wife is watching him from her chair. She has done this herself many times, many evenings when he was away, working at a distance, or staying with a work party through the harvest nights. She knows this process as well as he does, but tonight it is his task, and she watches with the kind of companionable, non-intrusive attention that one skilled person gives to watching another skilled person do something they both know how to do. Not checking, not supervising, just watching, with the mild pleasure of seeing a familiar and important thing done with care. This all happened so very long ago. This kneeling man, these careful hands, these coals being tucked in for the night like children under a blanket of ash, all of it already resolved, already past, already folded into the deep and gentle history of 1,000 winter evenings in 1,000 English cottages. Nothing from that world requires anything of you. You are simply here, warm and still and breathing, watching alongside the wife while the fire is banked. Just breathe. Let your body grow heavier. Let the weight of the day settle down through you, the way ash settles onto coals slowly, softly, without resistance. He adds a second layer. The first layer of ash has settled and the coal bed's glow, slightly muted but still visible, has reasserted itself through the grey. A second careful shovelful, slightly thicker this time, toward the centre of the bed where the heat is most concentrated, and therefore the burning, without restraint, would be fastest. He smooths it with the back of the shovel, drawing it level, filling the thin places, creating as even and consistent a layer as he can manage by firelight. It is an aesthetic act. In its way, he steps back slightly, still on one knee, and looks at it. The banked fire has a particular appearance, the coal bed beneath its ash covering, creating a slight convex rise in the centre of the hearth, warm grey above, the faintest orange glow showing at the edges where the ash thins toward the hearthstone. It looks, in this light, almost like something geological, like a small and ancient landscape, a hillside of warm ash with its heart still burning softly inside it. He adds one last element. From the basket beside the hearth, a small basket holding a few rounds of peat turf, cut from the common bog in autumn and dried through the summer and stored for exactly this purpose. He takes 2 pieces and sets them at the front of the coal bed. The peat is dark and dense, nearly brick-like in its dried form, with a surface texture somewhere between soil and wood. It has a smell of its own, even unburned, a deep, earthy, faintly sweet smell. The smell of preserved vegetation and deep time, of the moss and sedge and ancient organic matter that compressed and darkened into this material over thousands of years. Peat burns slower than wood, much slower, at a lower temperature, with less flame, but with a remarkable tenacity. A piece of good dry peat set against a coal bed will catch in its own time and burn, slowly, steadily, for hours. Through the night, the husband has set these 2 pieces against the banked coals not to rekindle the fire into active burning, but to provide a slow, sustained release of gentle heat through the darkest hours. Not warmth enough to heat the room's temperature will drop significantly by dawn, and the family will sleep under their heavy blankets, and their own body heat will carry them through. But warmth enough to keep the cottage from the deepest cold, warmth enough that the morning's coals, when the ash is raked away, will still have something to wake up to. He rocks back from his knee and stands. He is slow about it. A body that has been working since before dawn deserves to be slow about standing up from a kneeling position, and he gives himself that slowness without apology or comment. He straightens. He brushes his hands together once, twice, releasing a little ash dust that catches the candlelight briefly and then disperses. He looks at the banked fire for a moment longer. It looks back at him warmly, dimly, steadily, with the equanimity of something that knows it will still be here in the morning. He picks up the poker one more time and adjusts one edge of the peat, just slightly, a small final refinement. Then he sets the poker down, precisely, on its hook on the iron stand. The fire is banked, the work of it is done, and the cottage, which has been breathing warmth all day, will continue to breathe it through the night slowly, gently, from that carefully tended bed of coals and ash and patient peat, giving back into the cold air what the fire has been building all day. He turns from the hearth. His wife is looking at him. He sits back down at the table, and the room holds the 2 of them in the last of its evening, the candle burning steady on the table, the banked fire glowing low in the hearth, the children asleep above, the frost working quietly outside, and the night deep and still and full of stars. It is time, now, for the last thing, the most intimate thing, the thing that this family, like most families in Georgian England, never thought to write down or record or make account of, because it was simply what you did, simply how you ended, simply the natural and necessary closing of a day. The prayer. It begins without announcement. There is no signal, no formal declaration, no moment where one person turns to the other and says now. It simply begins, the way the most deeply habitual things begin, with a kind of organic, unself-conscious inevitability, the way breathing begins when you stop thinking about it, the way sleep begins when you finally stop resisting it. The husband pushes back slightly from the table. He sets down the last of his cup. The broth has been finished for some time now. The cup just a companionable presence beside him through the later part of the evening. He sets it down with the particular finality of a man setting something down for the last time tonight. A small, unconscious punctuation, the day making one of its last small marks. He folds his hands. Those extraordinary hands, wide and scarred and darkened from a lifetime outdoors, fold together on the table with a deliberateness that is different from the loose, comfortable stillness they rested in earlier this evening. This is a purposeful stillness, an intentional quieting, the body arranging itself into the posture of prayer the way it arranges itself for any deeply familiar physical act, not from conscious instruction, but from the long, reliable memory of the muscles themselves. His wife sets aside the mending. She sets it aside completely, not balanced on the chair's arm, not resting loosely in her lap, but placed with care into the basket, and the basket set on the floor. She straightens in her chair. She folds her own hands in her own lap. Her posture changes subtly, not rigid, not ceremonial, but composed, gathered. The quality of her attention shifting from the outward, task-focused attention of the working evening to something more inward, more still, more open. They bow their heads, not dramatically, not with the theatrical lowering of a painted subject in a religious scene. Just a gentle, natural inclination of the head, the chin dropping slightly, the eyes closing, the spine softening just fractionally in a way that feels like, and is, a small physical act of release, of letting the self be, for a moment, other than in charge. The room holds them, the candle holds them, the banked fire holds them, the sleeping children above hold them in that particular way that the people we love hold us even when they are not present. Their existence, a kind of warmth, a kind of weight, a kind of deep and constant context for everything we do and feel and think and ask of the dark. And the prayer begins. It is not a long prayer. It is not a performance. It is not the formal, structured liturgy of the Sunday church service, the Book of Common Prayer, with its beautiful, elaborate, somewhat distancing language of thee and thou, and grant us thy mercy and all the rest of it, which has its own tremendous power and beauty, but belongs, for this family, to a different context, a different mode of engagement with the sacred. This is something quieter, something more personal, something that has, over the years of this marriage, found its own shape and its own rhythm and its own particular vocabulary, a vocabulary drawn partly from Scripture, partly from the language of the Sunday service, but also, and perhaps most essentially, from the specific texture of this family's specific life. What stays with me when I sit quietly with the idea of Georgian working family prayer is how thoroughly it was woven into the ordinary fabric of daily life. For people of this era and this station, faith was not a separate department of existence, not something kept in a special compartment reserved for Sundays and crises. It was the atmosphere in which daily life was lived, the background condition, the assumed framework within which the ploughing happened, and the children were raised, and the fire was lit, and the pot was kept warm, and the socks were darned. The God of a Georgian farmworker's prayer was not the distant, abstract God of theological argument. He was, or was understood to be, immediately present in the specific details of a specific life, in the harvest that came in well this year, in the child's cough that did not worsen, in the fire that caught this morning, in the bread that was enough, just enough, and a little more than enough. He was thanked for these things directly, specifically, with the particular gratitude of someone who does not take the small goods of life for granted because experience has shown, clearly and repeatedly, that they are not guaranteed. You are safe, dear friend, warm and still and cradled in this quiet. Let the prayer of this household move through you without requiring anything of you. No particular belief, no particular practice, just the warmth of it, the gentleness of two people sitting in firelight and offering up, in whatever language they have, something like gratitude for something like grace. Let it be simply what it is, two human beings, at the end of a long day, acknowledging that the day was good. The husband speaks first, low and unhurried. His voice in this mode is different from his everyday voice, not louder, not more formal, but more deliberate. Each word given its full weight, each phrase allowed to land before the next one follows. He gives thanks for the day, for the ploughing done, for the ground that turned well despite the cold, for the oxen that worked steady and sound, for the meal that was good tonight, and here his voice carries something that is not quite emotion but is adjacent to it. A slight deepening, a slight slowing for the children who ate well and are sleeping safe above their heads, for the fire. He thanks God for the fire, specifically, not rhetorically, not as a figure of speech, but with the directness of someone who has known cold mornings when the fire did not catch easily, and knows, therefore, that a fire that catches well is a grace, is a gift, is something to be specifically and sincerely grateful for. For his wife, he does not elaborate, he does not describe, He simply names her in his prayer the way you name something in the presence of the one who gave it to you briefly, and with the full weight of what the name contains. His voice does something quiet in this moment, something private. She does not lift her head, but something in her stillness shifts, just slightly, the way a candle flame shifts when a warm breath reaches it. The prayer moves forward. He asks, now, and the grammar of the prayer has shifted, almost imperceptibly, from thanksgiving to petition, from looking back at the day to looking forward into the night and the days beyond it. He asks, in the plain and undemanding language that long-practiced faith tends to produce, for a good night, for the children to sleep safe and warm, for the boy's breathing to be clear by morning, for the coming winter to be manageable, not mild. He does not ask for mild. He has lived enough winters to know that mild is not reliably given, and he is not a man who asks for more than what is needed. He asks for manageable, for enough, for the cold to be something that can be endured and survived, and come out the other side of, into spring, for the work to continue to be there. He asks for this simply, without drama, in the knowledge that work steady, available, reasonably paid work is not a given for a farm worker in Georgian England, is not guaranteed from one season to the next, is something that depends on the health of the harvest and the mood of the tenant farmer and the complex, somewhat precarious web of local relationships and obligations that constitutes rural economic life in this era. He has been fortunate. He knows it. He asks quietly to continue to be so. Then his wife. Her voice is softer, not timid, not less present, just softer in timbre, like the difference between a low note played clearly and a high note played clearly, both fully sounded, both fully real, but different in their quality of warmth. She thanks God for her children. She does this in her own way, not listing them, not naming their qualities or their achievements, but simply acknowledging them, their existence, their specific, irreplaceable, entirely ordinary existence. The boy with his dark hair and his gap-toothed smile and his talent for finding interesting objects in the lane. The 5-year-old with her reasonableness and her string games and her detailed observations about the world. The 3-year-old who fell asleep on the rug and transferred through 3 kinds of warmth without waking. Who trusts so completely that the world is safe that her sleeping self does not bother to check. She gives thanks for these 3. And then, and this is where I find myself wanting to stop and simply be very still, because there is something in it that I think is almost unbearably beautiful. She gives thanks for what she has, not for what she wishes she had, not for what she hopes for, or what she is working toward, or what she aspires to, for what she has, right now, tonight, the fire banked, the children sleeping, the mending partway done, which means there is thread and wool to do it with, the pot keeping its broth warm on the hob, the stone walls doing their patient work of holding back the cold, the man at the table with his folded hands. This all happened so very long ago, and I find it, in the long perspective of the years between that cottage and this moment, one of the most quietly courageous things a human being can do. To be grateful for what is, rather than restless for what is not. To be, in the full and genuine sense of the word, satisfied, not complacent, not incurious, not without ambition for better days, but genuinely, presently, honestly satisfied with the good that is already here. This all happened so very long ago. These folded hands, this candlelit room, these 2 voices offering up their thanks and their small, honest requests into the dark, all of it already held in the past, already resolved, already part of the long, warm story of ordinary human life, making the best of what it has. Nothing from that world can trouble you. You are perfectly safe. Let your breath slow, just a little more. Let your body grow heavier and softer. Let the prayer of this household be, if you like, a kind of prayer for you too, a gentle acknowledgement that the day has been whatever it has been, and that the night is for resting and that you are held. The prayer ends, not with a declaration or a formal closing, or, rather, yes, with a closing, with the simple, ancient, two-syllable word that has closed prayers in the English language for as long as there has been an English language to close prayers in. Amen. He says it. She echoes it, just a breath behind, so that the two syllables arrive slightly doubled, slightly layered. The way two voices saying the same word at nearly the same time create something slightly fuller than either voice alone. Amen. The candle receives this. The banked fire receives this. The children above receive this in their sleep. Though they do not know it, the prayer offered up around them and over them like an additional warmth, like an extra blanket laid over already sleeping forms. The silence after the prayer has a specific quality, different from the silence before it. Fuller, somehow, more settled, as if something that was slightly unresolved has been resolved, something slightly held has been released. The room feels, in the aftermath of those low and sincere voices, more entirely at peace with itself. They sit for a moment in this silence. Neither of them moves immediately. Neither of them speaks. They allow the silence to be what it is, a natural, necessary conclusion. The pause at the end of a sentence that lets the meaning land before anything else is said. Then she rises. She goes to the shelf for the candle snuffer, a small cone of tin on a handle. Simple and effective. She carries the candle from the table to make the rounds of the room, checking, in the way that the last person awake in a household always checks, that everything is as it should be. The door is bolted. The shutter is secured. The pot lid is properly seated. The tools are hung. The fire is banked and contained and exactly as her husband left it. Everything is as it should be. She returns to the table. She raises the snuffer over the candle. She pauses, just for a moment, with the small cone hovering above the flame. This is the last light. After this, only the dim warmth of the banked coals will remain enough to see shapes by, barely, for the few moments it takes to cross the room and climb the loft ladder. She looks at her husband. He nods, just once, barely perceptibly. A small gesture that says, "Yes, we are ready." The day is done. She brings the snuffer down. The flame disappears. And the room enters its night. The darkness, when it comes, is not frightening. It is not the darkness of emptiness, or the darkness of absence, or the darkness of something taken away. It is a different kind of darkness, entirely. A full darkness, a warm darkness, a darkness that has weight and texture, and the faint, living glow of banked coals at one end of the room, giving everything the very dimmest amber outline, not enough to see clearly, just enough to move by, just enough to feel the room still present around you, still warm, still enclosing everything it has enclosed all evening, just enough. He crosses the room first. His feet know the floor, every dip and rise of the packed earth, every edge of the rag rug, every particular square inch of this small space is known to his feet in the way that your own home is known to you in the dark, not seen, but navigated by memory, by the body's quiet internal mapping of a familiar world. He does not stumble. He does not hesitate. He moves with the slow, unhurried confidence of a man who knows exactly where he is. He reaches the ladder. His hands find the wooden pegs. He climbs 4 steps, 5, and the loft receives him with its particular warmth, its smell of wool and straw and sleeping children, its low ceiling pressing gently from above. He moves carefully in the small space, with the practiced care of a large person navigating a confined area that holds sleeping small people, and he lowers himself onto the far side of the mattress, the side nearest the eave, where the ceiling is lowest, where the thatch is closest, where the cold from outside is most faintly perceptible as a slight freshness in the air. The straw whispers beneath him. The children do not stir. He stretches out a long, slow, full-body extension, every joint releasing in sequence, the spine lengthening against the mattress with a faint protest from tired muscles that has been waiting all evening for exactly this moment of complete horizontal rest. His arms settle, his legs settle, his breathing, already slowed by the prayer and the quiet of the late evening, slows further still. He is asleep before his wife reaches the top of the ladder. Not deeply asleep, not yet, not for another few minutes, but in the shallows of it already, the first gentle waters of sleep already closing around him, the day releasing its grip on him increment by increment, the body finally, gratefully, completely allowed to let go. She follows him. She moves through the dark room below with the same quiet confidence his feet expressed a moment ago. The cold of the room's far corners is perceptible now, the fire's influence, without active flames, concentrated in the hearthside half of the space, leaving the corners and the doorway slightly crisper, slightly more aware of the November night pressing against the walls. She does not linger. She pulls her shawl more closely at her shoulders for the few steps it takes to reach the ladder, and then she is climbing, and the loft is around her, and the warmth of the sleeping bodies already gathered there reaches her like a welcome. She settles in beside the children. She draws the heavy woolen blanket up. It is dense and slightly scratchy against the chin, the way old wool always is, not unpleasantly so, just present, just real, just the specific and familiar weight of this particular blanket on this particular night. She lies on her side, facing the low peak of the thatch, and she is quiet. The cottage breathes. That is the only way I can describe what happens now. In this room, in this loft, in this small stone and thatch building on its frozen lane in Georgian England, in the middle of the 18th century, the cottage breathes. Not metaphorically, or not only metaphorically, there is a genuine, slow, rhythmic exchange of air happening through the thatch above, and the slight gaps around the shutter, and the breath of 5 sleeping people filling the space with warmth from their own bodies, their own living heat replacing what the banked fire no longer provides in full. You are warm, dear friend, completely and perfectly warm. Let yourself settle now, the way these people are settling into the horizontal, into the still, into the soft and wordless country that lies just below the surface of wakefulness, where the day has no more claims on you and the night asks only that you rest. Just breathe, in, slowly, and out. The sounds of the sleeping cottage are very specific. They are worth attending to, because attending to them is itself a kind of rest, the mind given something so gentle, so rhythmic, so entirely without urgency that it cannot help but slow its own turning, cannot help but match itself to the pace of what it is hearing. The fire makes sounds still, small sounds. The occasional faint tick of cooling iron, the crane arm contracting slightly as the metal loses heat, producing a brief, sharp, almost inaudible click that happens once and is not repeated for several minutes, then happens again somewhere else in the fireplace's metal components. The peat, set against the coal bed, is catching now in its slow, patient way, not crackling, not popping, nothing as active as that, just a very faint, very occasional, nearly subsonic hiss as moisture deep in the dried turf releases and escapes as steam, too slight to be visible, barely audible even in this level of quiet. The thatch above the loft speaks in a different register. It makes the sounds of a living material under temperature change, slight creak of the dried reeds and straw, a faint settling as the frost deepens on the outer surface, and the material contracts minutely. Not alarming sounds. Not the sounds of damage or distress. The sounds of a building doing what buildings do, responding to the world around it, adjusting, accommodating, holding its shape against the gentle pressure of the winter night. And the wind. There is a wind tonight, in the upper air. Not at ground level, the lane and the yard are still, the frost undisturbed, the cold settling straight down without movement. But above the cottage, above the village, moving in the high dark sky above the stars, there is a current of air that occasionally descends far enough to brush the topmost ridge of the thatch, with a sound like a hand drawn slowly across a fabric surface. A soft, long, rhythmic sound that begins and fades and begins again, irregular but never startling, never sharp, just the world breathing, in its large and ancient way, over the small warm island of this sleeping house. This all happened so very long ago. These sounds, the fire ticking, the thatch settling, the high wind moving over the roof, all of it resting now in the deep, kind, undemanding past. Nothing from that world needs anything from you. You are entirely here, entirely safe, entirely free to drift wherever the night wants to take you. Let the sounds of this sleeping cottage be the last sounds your waking mind attends to tonight. Let them carry you. The 3 children are deeply asleep. The boy on his side, one arm flung outward across the mattress with the characteristic abandon of a sleeping child, that utter, boneless, trusting release of all physical self-management that adults lose somewhere along the way and spend the rest of their lives in sleep, trying to recover. His breath is regular, clear. The slight thickness that his mother noticed earlier has resolved in sleep, in the warmth, in the specific mercy of a child's body that heals quickly and thoroughly and without fuss. He breathes easily now. The 5-year-old is curled against her mother's back, a comma of small warmth, knees drawn up, hands tucked beneath her chin, her face turned toward the low peak of the thatch with an expression of such complete and absolute peace that it seems almost too beautiful to be accidental, as if sleep knows what it is doing when it arranges a face, and chooses, when there is nothing to resist it, to arrange it into the shape of the soul at rest. The 3-year-old is in the middle. As she was settled, she has not moved. She will not move until morning. She is one of those children who sleeps with the perfect stillness of deep water, her body finding its position and committing to it fully, without the restless turning and adjusting that afflicts lighter sleepers. Just still, just warm, just entirely, completely elsewhere. The husband is asleep. He went quickly, as working men who have given their full physical selves to the day tend to go, not gradually, not in stages, not with the lingering half-consciousness of someone whose mind is still reviewing and reconsidering and planning. He went all at once, or nearly, like a stone lowered into deep water. There is a rightness to this, a justice in it. The body that has worked faithfully all day deserves the sleep that comes without delay. His breathing is deep and steady and slow. Each breath in a long, full, complete inhalation, the chest and belly rising together. Each breath out longer still. The full release, unhurried, the body making use of every second of the exhale. Between the out-breath and the next in-breath, a brief pause not quite long enough to be alarming, just long enough to be felt, just long enough to be the silence at the bottom of the breath, the still point of the sleeping body's rhythm. In, out, the still point, in again. The wife is the last one awake. She is awake in the way that people are awake in the last few minutes before sleep, not alert, not thinking, not planning or reviewing or analysing, just present in the most minimal sense, conscious of the warmth, conscious of the weight of the blanket, conscious of the breathing of her family around and beside her, each breath a confirmation, each steady exhale a small reassurance that all is well, that everyone she loves is here, that the night is doing nothing to any of them except offering them rest. What stays with me, in this last waking moment of hers, is the simplicity of it. After all the day's work, the fire lit before dawn, the breakfast made, the children managed, the pot tended, the cleaning done, the spinning worked at in the afternoon intervals, the supper cooked and served and cleared, the mending begun, the children bathed and carried to bed, the evening's quiet company with her husband, the prayer offered up with honest gratitude after all of it, what she is left with, in this last conscious moment, is simply warmth. The warmth of the blanket, the warmth of the bodies beside her, the warmth of the loft, which has held the heat of the day in its low-ceilinged space, and is releasing it now, slowly, through the night. The warmth that will carry all of them through the cold, dark hours, and deliver them, unharmed and rested, to the morning. Just warmth. Just this. Breathe easy, dear friend. Breathe easy and slow. You are warm and you are held, and the night has nothing in it that means you any harm. Just like this woman, in this loft, in this cottage, on this winter night 300 years ago, you have come to the end of a day. You have done what the day required of you, and now the night is yours. The darkness is yours. The rest is yours. Let it be yours. Take it without guilt, without resistance, without any sense that you should be doing something other than exactly this settling into the horizontal, into the still, into the waiting dark that is nothing but rest offered freely night after night, to every living thing that needs it. The wife's eyes are closed. The thoughts that were moving through her mind, slow and quiet as they were, are slowing further, becoming less like thoughts and more like images, brief, disconnected, gently strange in the way that the mind's last offerings before sleep are always gently strange. The string game, the thin line of light at the shutter's edge, her husband's hands, the spinning wheel in the corner, its large wheel perfectly still, the taste of warm broth, the specific sound of 3 children breathing in unison, slightly offset, slightly overlapping, a soft and living chord of rest. These images move through her, and then they move past her, and there is nothing left but warmth and weight and the sound of breathing and the faint tick of cooling iron and the wind above the thatch and the patient darkness of a Georgian winter night full of stars, holding a small stone cottage and everything it contains with the same impartial, generous, ancient care with which it has always held the small, warm islands of human habitation in its wide, dark sea. The cottage rests. The fire breathes, low and steady, at its banked heart. The frost does its quiet work on the thatch, on the gate latch, on the frozen lane, and inside this small, low, whitewashed, wood-smoke-scented, tallow-lit, prayer-warmed, love-kept cottage, every living soul is asleep, completely, peacefully, and perfectly, at rest. Let us rest here, for a moment before we go, not quite asleep, or perhaps you are, and these words are reaching you through the soft membrane of that first shallow sleep, the way sounds from a warm room reach someone dozing near a fire. Either way, that is entirely as it should be. Either way, you are exactly where you need to be. I want to sit with you, just for a little while longer, in the aftermath of this evening, in the warm residue of it, because I find, when I spend a long time in the company of an evening like this one, when I follow a farm worker's family through the small, unhurried hours of their Georgian night, from the stacked bowls after supper to the last breath of the wife settling into sleep, I find that something remains. Not information, not historical facts neatly organized and catalogued, something less definable than that, and more lasting, a quality, a feeling, a set of quiet understandings that seem to arrive not through the front door of the intellect but through some side entrance, some softer portal, the way warmth enters a room not through a single point but gradually, through every surface at once. Let me try to name some of what stays with me. The first thing, the one that rises most immediately, most insistently, is the extraordinary power of small rituals. What we followed tonight was not, by any measure that our world tends to use for measuring things, a remarkable evening. Nothing of historical consequence occurred, no great decision was made, no creative work was produced that would outlast the people who made it. No wealth was generated, no status confirmed, no record left in any ledger or diary or parish register. By the accounting systems of history, by the accounting systems of most of our lives, this evening was invisible, unremarkable, not worth noting. And yet the banking of that fire, performed with such patient care, the needle moving through worn wool by the fire's light, the small face washed with warm water before bed, the folded hands, the 2 voices saying Amen in the candlelit dark, these rituals, these small, repeated, unspectacular acts of tending and caring and maintaining, were not nothing. They were the substance of a life. They were what a life, examined closely enough, actually consists of. We sometimes make the mistake, I think, of imagining that life is made of its peaks, its achievements, its milestones, its memorable and photographable and narratable moments. And those things matter, truly. But they are not the substance. The substance is the daily, the repeated, the apparently unremarkable, the supper cleared and the fire banked and the child carried to bed, and the prayer said quietly in the dark. These are the things from which a life is actually constructed, the load-bearing elements of a human existence, and they deserve to be seen with the same seriousness and the same reverence we bring to anything that holds something precious in place. What strikes me the most is how fully these people seem to know this. Whether consciously or not, and I suspect it was mostly not, mostly simply lived rather than articulated, the wife who darned the sock by firelight, the husband who banked the coals with such unhurried care, both of them spoke, through their actions, a philosophy of attention, of presence, of the sacredness of the immediate and the ordinary. Every small act performed with full attention is, in its way, a form of love. Every small act of tending the fire, the pot, the child, the worn wool, the sleeping household is a declaration that this matters, that these things, these people, this life, are worth caring for with the full weight of careful human hands. This moves me because I think it is something we are always, in our loudest and most distracted moments, at risk of forgetting. The worth of small things, the dignity of ordinary care. You are safe, dear friend. Warm and still, let these thoughts move through you gently, like the warmth from a banked fire moving through a sleeping room, not demanding, not urgent, just present and steady and real. The second thing that stays with me is the quality of enough. I keep returning to this word, this concept, this quiet and radical idea that seems to live at the heart of this evening and this household. Not enough as resignation, not enough as defeat, but enough as a genuine, considered, hard-won recognition that what is present right now, in this room, behind these walls, within these relationships, this is sufficient for a good life. Not a perfect life, not an easy life, not a life without hardship or worry, or the particular anxieties that belong to a farm worker's family in Georgian England, with its economic precariousness and its dependence on weather and harvest, and the goodwill of those above them, in the social order, but a good life, a life with warmth in it, and bread, and the specific irreplaceable weight of children asleep above your head, while you sit by the last of the fire and fold your hands in the dark and find, at the bottom of the day, something that is genuinely, honestly, unmistakably gratitude. I find this quietly revolutionary. In an era our own that is so thoroughly organised around the principle of more comfort, more efficiency, more productivity, more stimulation, more options, more achievement, more of everything, always, as the unquestioned direction of travel. In this era, the philosophy of this Georgian cottage, the philosophy of the banked fire and the mended sock, and the prayer for manageable, not mild, feels not like poverty but like wisdom, like a wisdom that costs something to arrive at, but that, once arrived at, produces a quality of daily peace that all the more in the world cannot purchase. The wife who gave thanks for what she had, not what she hoped for, not what she was working toward, but what was already present, already given, already here, was practicing something that every philosophical and spiritual tradition in the history of human thought has identified as essential to contentment: the practice of presence, the practice of gratitude for the actual rather than the imagined, the practice of being fully and without resistance here. What stays with me is how the physical conditions of Georgian rural life, the small room, the single fire, the limited and costly candle, the darkness that fell completely and admitted no alternatives to stillness and rest, how all of these conditions, which we might be tempted to see only as privations, also functioned as a kind of gift. The gift of a world whose smallness made it possible to be fully present in. The gift of a darkness that made rest not merely a good idea but the only available option. The gift of a silence so complete and so encompassing that the sound of your own family breathing was the whole of the acoustic world. We have gained so much in the centuries since this cottage held its warmth, and we have lost perhaps just this one thing, this specific, irreproducible quality of a life, small enough to be fully inhabited. This all happened so very long ago. These people, this evening, this fire and its patient coals, all of it folded now into the warm and gentle past, where it rests without urgency, without demand, without needing anything from you or from me, except perhaps to be remembered, to be seen, to be honoured in the quiet way that we honour things when we give them our full attention for a little while and say, with that attention, you mattered, you were real, you were, in your small and ordinary way, extraordinary. The third thing, and perhaps the deepest, is the intimacy of continuity. We are not so different from these people. I know this is easy to say, and I know it can slide into something sentimental if we are not careful, something that papers over the real and significant differences between their world and ours, between their hardships and our own. I do not want to paper over anything. The Georgian farm worker's life was harder than most of ours in most of the ways that matter physically. Shorter, more exposed to illness and cold and uncertainty, more dependent on forces beyond individual control. And yet, the way the wife looked at the sleeping face of her 3-year-old on the rug, that nameless, private, overwhelming recognition of the goodness of something is not a historical artifact. It is not a Georgian phenomenon. It is one of the oldest and most universal of all human experiences, and it is happening right now, tonight, in 10,000 rooms, in 10,000 countries, wherever a parent leans over a sleeping child and feels that specific, inexpressible thing. The way the husband and wife sat in their parallel quiet, each doing their own work, comfortable in each other's presence without needing to fill the silence. This is not an 18th century skill. It is a human one. It is the skill of any two people who have chosen each other completely and settled over time into the deep and restful knowledge of being known. The prayer, said low in the candlelit dark, thanking whatever is larger than oneself for the specific goods of a specific day. This is not a Georgian ritual. It is a human one, older than any particular religion, older than any particular language, as old as the first person who looked up at the first fire and felt, without words, something like gratitude for something like warmth. We are in this lineage. Every one of us who has ever banked a fire, literally or metaphorically, every one of us who has ever darned or tended or kept something warm against the cold, every one of us who has ever folded our hands at the end of a long day and offered up, in whatever form our offering takes, something like thanks for something like grace. We belong to the same story as this unnamed woman in her unnamed cottage on her unnamed lane in Georgian England. We are the continuation of it. And this, I find, is perhaps the most consoling thing of all to carry from an evening like this one. The sense that we are not alone in our ordinary days, that the small, careful, loving work of tending a home and raising children, and keeping a fire and mending what is worn and praying what is honest, that this work connects us, backward and forward through time, to an unbroken chain of ordinary people doing exactly the same thing, making warmth, keeping it, passing it on. Let that be the last thought, if a thought is needed at all. Let it settle gently, the way ash settles on coals. Let it be, if you like, the last warmth before sleep, the knowledge that you are part of something long and continuous and genuinely good, that the small acts of care you perform in your own life, in your own rooms, for your own people, these are not invisible. They are seen, somehow, by all the hands that perform them before yours, and all the hands that will perform them after. You are warm, you are held, you are, in the most ancient and the most ordinary and the most extraordinary sense of the word home. Sleep now, just sleep, and so we leave them. We leave them as they are, the whole household sleeping, the fire breathing low in its banked heart, the frost working its patient, beautiful work on the thatch above their heads. We leave them warm and safe and entirely at rest in their small stone cottage on their frozen Georgian lane, under their winter sky full of uncountable stars. We leave them as they deserve to be left, with tenderness, with gratitude, with the particular reverence that is owed to ordinary people who lived ordinary lives with extraordinary care, who tended their fires and mended their socks, and carried their children to bed and said their prayers in the dark, and woke again before dawn and did it all again, day after day, season after season, with a steadiness and a wholeness that I find, every time I sit with it, genuinely humbling. Thank you for spending this evening with them, with me. I know that many of you are asleep already, and that is the most perfect thing you could have given this story. To let it carry you off, somewhere in the middle of the darning, or the firelight, or the banking of the coals, to have drifted, gently and without resistance, into your own rest while the Georgian cottage did its quiet work around you. If you are still here, still listening, In whatever state of wakefulness or near sleep you find yourself in, then I want you to know something. Whatever kind of day today was, whatever it held, however it felt, however far it was from the simple warmth of the evening we spent together, you made it through. You are here. You are warm. You are horizontal, and the night is yours, and the morning, when it comes, will come in its own time without requiring anything of you right now. Right now, there is only this, the quiet, the warmth, the slow, easy, entirely sufficient breath. In and out. Let the cottage go now, if it hasn't already drifted from you. Let the candlelight soften and dissolve. Let the sound of the fire and the thatch and the winter wind fade into the background, and then into silence, and then into the particular personal warm dark that belongs only to you, to your body, to your rest. You have been such good company tonight. You always are. I am grateful, every time, that you choose to spend these quiet hours here in the old stories, in the firelit rooms, in the unhurried company of people who lived long before us and left no famous record of themselves, and yet managed, in their small and faithful way, to show us something true about what it means to be alive and human and doing your best in the world you were given. Next time, and there will be a next time, whenever you are ready, whenever the night calls for it, I want to take you somewhere equally warm, equally old, equally full of the small and irreplaceable details of a life lived with care. I am thinking of a spring morning in a medieval herb garden somewhere in England, somewhere around the year 1320, where a monastery's infirmera tends her beds of lavender and chamomile and meadowsweet in the early light, before the bells call the community to prayer. There is dew on everything, there is birdsong, there is the smell of herbs in the morning air and the sound of a wooden gate, and the very specific, very ancient piece of a garden tended by the same hands, in the same rows, season after season, for 100 years. I think you will love it there, but that is for another night. Tonight is for this, for the last breath of a Georgian winter evening, given freely to you, for the warmth of a cottage that existed, in some form, in some version, in 1,000 places across the English countryside in the middle of the 18th century, holding families exactly like this one through the cold and the dark and the long months of winter. For the fire, always, in the end, for the fire. Sleep well, my friend. Sleep deeply. Sleep safely. You are warm, and you are held, and the night is long and generous and entirely yours. Good night.